Hey guys, tonight we begin with the life inside an ancient Roman prison. A place where men woke not to sunlight or song, but to iron shackles, damp stone walls, and the quiet ache of hunger that never quite faded. Feared across the empire. Yet inside these cells, life wasn't spectacle. It was silence, steady endurance, and rules carved deeper than any inscription. No grand speeches, no marble glory, just shadows, cold air, and the slow drip of time passing unnoticed. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now dim the lights, get that soft fan noise going, and let's drift into tonight's slow journey. You're already in too deep before you realize it. One step into this ancient Roman prison, and there's no easy turning back. The door slams shut behind you, not with a dramatic clang, but a heavy, resigned thud of wood reinforced with bronze bands. It's the sort of sound that doesn't echo sharply, just settles like an unwanted guest in the back of your mind. The walls around you are blocks of tufa stone, cold, uneven, and slick with moisture in places where no sunlight ever touches. It smells here like sour straw and things left too long to rot. There's no fresh breeze coming through the single, high-placed slit in the wall that barely counts as a window. If it's daylight outside, you wouldn't know it. You stand there a moment longer than you mean to, letting your eyes adjust, but there's no real adjustment. Just more darkness, pressing down like a wet wool blanket. You take a careful step forward, and your sandal scrapes against something, straw maybe, or worse. And here's where the weight of it starts to settle on your chest. The air isn't just stale. It's heavy, thicker somehow. It's the same air that's been breathed and exhaled 1,000 times over by the men and women kept in here before you. There's no furniture to speak of. If you expected benches, or maybe at least a ledge to sit on, think again. Roman prisons weren't built for comfort. They weren't even really built for containment in the modern sense. This isn't a place for long-term stays, with visiting hours and allotted time in a courtyard. This is a holding box for the condemned and the forgotten, people awaiting trial, punishment, or simply left here until someone higher up remembered their name. You can feel that in every stone. A single torch burns at the far end of the hall, its light too feeble to warm or brighten the space meaningfully. The flickering shadows along the wall give everything a shape it doesn't really have. Faces in the stone, fingers reaching from cracks. You know they're not there, but the mind plays tricks in places like this. And honestly, it doesn't help that the torch smells more like burning animal fat than any sort of clean oil. Romans used what they had, and what they had wasn't always pleasant. You run your hand lightly along the wall beside you, careful not to lean too hard, because no one trusts a Roman wall not to crumble after enough centuries. And your fingers come away with damp grit, tiny flakes of history, clinging like dust that never quite settles. Historians often debate whether these prisons were deliberately made so uncomfortable, or if they just happened that way through negligence. Some suggest Roman lawmakers didn't care if their prisoners lasted long, while others argue it was simply the architectural limitations of the time. Whichever it is, standing here now, the result feels deliberate. Now comes the real test, moving further in. Roman prisons weren't single rooms. They wound on in narrow corridors, branching off into smaller cells. Each doorway here is framed in thick stone, with iron hinges so aged they look like fossilized bones. You step under one of these arches, ducking slightly, even if you don't need to. It just feels wrong not to, as though the place might punish arrogance. The cell you enter is no larger than a walk-in closet, and somehow that makes it worse. The ceiling is low enough that you'd almost brush your head if you stood tall, but there's no real danger of that since you instinctively hunch your shoulders. Something about the space invites it. Huddling feels safer, like making yourself smaller might make the walls back off a little. On the floor, there's a pit in one corner. No explanation needed. Roman hygiene wasn't known for its luxury in these places. If the cell was cleaned, it wasn't often. A thin layer of grime covers everything. Some ancient scratches are visible on the walls. Tally marks, maybe? Or prayers in forgotten names? Or just the restless scratching of someone trying to fight off boredom, hunger, or madness? There's no way to know for sure. Some archaeologists claim to have identified actual inscriptions in old prison cells, graffiti by doomed prisoners. But just as many doubt those marks mean anything at all. Outside the cell, faint echoes drift back toward you. Someone's footsteps, measured and deliberate. A guard, perhaps. Or maybe just another prisoner shifting on the stone floor. But there's no voice to go with it. Romans didn't allow noise in these places unless it served a purpose. Shouting would earn you nothing but a cuff from a guard or worse. Silence ruled here. You step back into the hall, moving further into the labyrinth. Each doorway looks the same, blank stone, iron-bound. If you had to find your way back out, you probably couldn't. And there's a small, steady drip of water from somewhere overhead. You don't know if it's rain seeping through cracks or just condensation from centuries of cold, but it's rhythmic and relentless. One drop, another, another. The kind of sound that might drive a person mad if they listen to it too long. This entire space feels deliberately cut off from the city above. That's the strange part. Somewhere not too far from here, life in Rome goes on. Markets, senators arguing, bakers shouting out prices. But inside these walls, that world feels impossibly distant. You could scream your name until your voice gave out, and Rome would never hear you. And as you pause there, taking in the silent, heavy dark, another thought crosses your mind. Did anyone ever escape from a place like this? Historians have long puzzled over that very question. While there are stories of prisoners breaking free during riots, or being smuggled out by bribed guards, there's no clear record. It might be that no one survived long enough to write it down. Or maybe the city simply didn't care to remember the ones who slipped through the cracks. You wouldn't blame them. The deeper you move into the prison, the less it feels like a structure built by human hands. The corridors narrow. The ceiling dips until it's close enough to brush against your scalp if you stand up straight. Each breath grows heavier, not because the air is changing, but because you are. You start to hunch without realizing it, shoulders tensing as if some instinct from thousands of years ago understands what kind of place this is before your conscious mind catches up. There's a specific kind of quiet down here, not true silence, but the quiet of a place abandoned by hope. Your footsteps barely make a sound, no. Even that steady drip of water from before seems more muffled somehow, as if it knows not to draw attention. And then, there they are, hanging against the far wall in the next cell, catching what little light flickers from the torch you passed. Shackles. Thick iron rings, blackened with rust, some still dangling from the wall by short, stubby chains. One or two hang loose and empty. Others are snapped shut around what looks like the decayed stump of rope or old cloth. Or worse, things you don't really want to identify. You step closer, not because you want to, but because that's what this kind of place does. It pulls you in, makes you look even when you shouldn't. The shackles aren't polished or symmetrical. Each one is slightly different from the next, some round, some more oval. No careful crafting here. Roman prisons didn't worry about fit or comfort. They used whatever iron was available, hammered crudely into shape, designed purely to hold wrists or ankles tight enough to bite into flesh after a few hours. And most prisoners wore both, ankles and wrists chained together, sometimes even a collar added to make sure no one sat too comfortably. You reach out instinctively, fingertips hovering just a breath away from one rusted ring. You don't actually touch it, maybe because some part of you believes that old iron still remembers. Not just in a poetic way, but in a literal, quiet memory of skin pressed against it, blood caught in the joints, the silent weight of years spent holding on to people long since turned to dust. In this particular cell, there's no straw on the ground, just bare stone, slick with some kind of moss in one corner. You crouch slightly, peering at the floor, and there, etched faintly into the stone, are more marks. Scratches this time. Names, or perhaps just lines, someone made counting off the endless stretch of days. Historians still debate whether those scratched records meant days, months, or were simply carved mindlessly to pass the hours. No two theories ever quite match. What's strange about Roman prisons isn't just the shackles or the darkness. It's that so many of the people sent here weren't necessarily criminals in the way modern minds think of it. Some were debtors, others political prisoners. Accused conspirators, foreigners caught in the wrong place. Romans didn't distinguish much between dangerous and inconvenient when it came to deciding who should be locked away. You straighten up slowly, your spine stiff from crouching too long, and listen again. Nothing. That strange, heavy quiet sits over everything. Not even a rat moves in the corners. That could just be a trick of preservation, this particular space untouched for centuries. But it feels deeper than that. You can't help wondering if silence here wasn't enforced in life as much as in death. No talking, no singing, no comfort. Just the slow drag of shackles across stone floors as someone shifted in their sleep or moved to scratch another line into the wall. A few steps further down the corridor, you come across another cell, this one different. The door is slightly ajar. That's rare. Romans didn't leave prison cells open unless there was a reason. Maybe the hinges failed long after the prison was abandoned, or perhaps it was left that way as a warning or a reminder. You push it open just a little farther, careful not to make too much noise even now. Inside, a single beam of dusty light slips through a crack high up in the stone. It's the first time you've seen daylight in here, and it feels unnatural, like sunlight wandering where it shouldn't belong. The light falls across more shackles fixed to the wall, but also something else. A crude stone bench, barely wide enough for one person. This was a holding cell of a different kind, possibly for someone considered important enough to merit a separate space. Historians argue about this kind of room, wondering if it was used for senators under arrest or foreign kings waiting on their final sentence. No clear records explain it. Some say there were private cells for prisoners of status, while others insist all were treated equally in Roman justice. Cruelly and impersonally, the bench is worn smooth. You run a hand along its edge, feeling the grooves where someone must have sat for days, maybe weeks, rubbing their hands along the stone. No words carved here, just silent wear, proof of existence through slow, repetitive motion. And now, for a moment, you pause to picture what it must have been like living out days or weeks in this cell. No window except that thin slit far above. No bed, just shackles, a stone bench, and your own thoughts. No one calling your name. No one visiting. In many Roman prisons, there weren't even regular guards inside the cell blocks. Once a person was locked in, that was it. Food, if it came at all, might be tossed in once a day, or not at all if no one remembered you. You take a slow breath, though the air hardly feels like it helps. It's still thick with that layered scent. Ancient dust, stone, rust, and something deeper. You glance back toward the corridor. The light is already fading. The torch you passed earlier might be dying out, leaving you to navigate by instinct and memory. Before moving on, you cast one last look around this cell, and there's a final quiet thought that slips into place. How many people stood exactly where you stand now, waiting, counting, hoping for footsteps that never came? No one knows. Records weren't kept for most prisoners. Names were lost. Historians sometimes stumble across fragments, graffiti, old inscriptions, but the vast majority of those locked away here simply disappeared. their stories forgotten as completely as if they'd never lived at all. You pull the door gently shut behind you as you step out again, not because you need to, but because it feels wrong to leave it open. The iron groans softly. The corridor ahead seems even darker now. You keep moving down that same corridor, one deliberate step after the next, until your foot brushes against something soft, not stone, not straw. You crouch down instinctively, careful with your balance in the darkness, and your hand meets a scrap of cloth, worn almost to threads, discolored, and crusted stiff in places. Probably part of a tunic left behind by someone long forgotten. That little fragment says more than most marble inscriptions ever could. It tells you that whoever wore it likely spent days, maybe weeks, sitting hungry in this very corridor. Because here's the thing about Roman prisons. They didn't feed you. At least, not officially. Unlike modern prisons with set meal times and calorie counts, ancient Roman detention was very much a bring-your-own-food situation. If your family or friends didn't supply bread, water, or a few figs once in a while, you simply went without. It wasn't even considered cruelty. It was just how the system worked. Of course, the city did have the grain dole, the famed annona, that regular distribution of free or subsidized grain for Roman citizens, meant to keep the city's lower classes from rioting out of hunger. But the grain dole wasn't designed for prisoners. That was the strange gap in the system. You could qualify for public grain if you were free and poor, standing in line with a token to show your entitlement. Yet once you crossed through the prison gates, that entitlement vanished. As you walk now, you imagine standing in one of those queues out in the forum. Rows and rows of ordinary Romans clutching wooden markers, waiting for a clerk to measure out sacks of wheat. The city's survival depended on it. Yet just steps away, inside places like this, entire rooms full of people sat with nothing but stale water and what few crusts might be passed through the bars by a relative brave enough to visit. You turn a corner now into a wider chamber, a holding area, perhaps. There's a large stone basin built into the wall here, cracked down the middle, and this is where things start to make a little more sense. Romans sometimes provided communal water sources in prisons, though not always out of kindness. Water kept prisoners alive just long enough to stand trial. You run your hand along the edge of the basin. It's worn smooth, like countless other places you've touched tonight. But here, there's another layer, ash stains. Someone used this as a place to mix food, perhaps. Thin porridge made from leftover grain, or lentils if luck allowed. More likely, it was gruel thickened with whatever was cheapest that week. Ground acorns, chickpea flour, bits of fish paste so old it barely qualified as edible anymore. Historians still debate whether Roman prisons had official ration systems. Some sources mention the carcer publicus, the public prison, being supplied with a basic allowance of bread and water. But others insist it was entirely up to the prisoner's family or patron. No surviving law spells it out completely. And in the absence of clarity, you have to imagine. Some prisoners ate, others starved. It depended not on law, but on who cared enough to remember you were in here. You can picture now a slave or servant approaching these cells, probably barefoot, carrying a cloth sack slung over one shoulder. Maybe a senator's messenger, maybe a baker's apprentice sent by a mother or wife. They'd come at the appointed time, call a name through the bars, and hand over a few lumps of bread so dry they cracked like pottery in your hands. Or perhaps a handful of dates, if someone could afford it. You brush past another doorway now, glancing in. This cell is smaller still. And here, near the wall, lies what remains of a clay bowl, broken in two, edges sharp as glass. It must have been thrown or dropped in frustration. The shape is unmistakable. A simple terra siglata bowl, the kind mass-produced in workshops across the empire. No fancy glaze, no decoration, just functional. That's how Roman prison meals worked. Functional, not comforting. bread so hard it had to be soaked in water to chew. Lentils boiled until they lost all texture. Sometimes a scrap of salted fish, but that was rare. The phrase bread and water wasn't just a saying here. It was a literal description of survival. You pause there, eyes adjusting again as the last torch fades further behind you. And you wonder, just for a moment, what it would have been like to depend on someone else for every bite you ate. Not just for a week, but for months, years even. Many Roman prisoners were held indefinitely while waiting for trial or a decision from some magistrate who might not even remember their name. And during that time, their survival depended entirely on how well connected they were. If you had patrons, wealthy family members, or loyal slaves, you might receive regular rations. If not, hunger would gnaw at you as surely as the iron shackles on your wrists. There's an almost bitter irony in that. Outside these walls, the empire's granaries overflowed, vast storerooms filled with grain from Egypt, Africa, Sicily. Enough food to feed millions. Yet inside here, a single crust of bread could become a matter of life or death. You keep walking. The walls seem to close in again as the corridor narrows once more. And then you spot it. A small wooden shelf fixed to the wall, rotted almost beyond recognition. It's barely holding together, but its placement suggests something once important rested there. Perhaps a lamp. Or, as some archaeologists have proposed, a shallow bowl of food placed just out of reach as a final form of punishment or humiliation. No one knows for sure. What is certain is that hunger wasn't the only challenge prisoners faced. Thirst crept in just as quickly. Roman writers mention prisoners bribing guards with whatever scraps they had, rings, tunics, even favors, to get just an extra cup of water. And once again, records are maddeningly vague. Some suggest they were regular distributions. Others paint a far bleaker picture, days passing with nothing but air and stone dust to fill your mouth. You take one last slow breath as you reach the end of this corridor. Ahead, another iron-bound door waits, heavier than the rest, perhaps leading deeper into the prison's core, or maybe back out toward the city above. But before you move, you let your hand rest against the stone once more, feeling the faint chill of it. Not just cold, ancient, weighted with all the moments that passed in this space. Meals eaten slowly, water rationed drop by drop, prisoners waiting in silence for footsteps that might never come again. And above all of it, the quiet fact that even in the heart of Rome, city of emperors, senators, marble villas, places like this existed, hidden just beneath the surface, out of sight, out of mind. The further you go, the heavier everything feels. It's not just the air or the stone, though both weigh on your shoulders like invisible sandbags. It's the creeping realization that time moves differently here. Roman justice wasn't swift. It wasn't clean. And as you make your way down yet another corridor, where the walls close in until it feels like walking through the inside of a tomb, that fact becomes unavoidable. There's no court date pinned to a wall. No set schedule where someone would knock and say, "Today's your hearing." You might wait days, weeks, months, sometimes longer. There are cases where prisoners languished for years without ever seeing a magistrate. Roman law allowed for delays. Officially, there were supposed to be trials in a timely fashion. But in practice? Well, it depended entirely on status, connections, and whether your case was important enough to get noticed. You step into a slightly wider room now. Its purpose is clear from the layout, a holding chamber. You can still see the grooves in the floor where benches once stood, all facing the same direction. This would have been where prisoners sat waiting for transfer to a tribunal, shackled together in rows like tired, hungry shadows. And that's where things get even stranger. Roman courts weren't held inside prisons. They happened in the open, usually outdoors, in the forum or in designated basilicas. Judges, called praetors or consuls, depending on the year, would sit on raised platforms, listening to both sides. There were laws, so many laws, but following them exactly was more art than science. If you were a Roman citizen, you had rights under the 12 tables. Theoretically, you couldn't be punished without trial. You couldn't be whipped without due process. But theory didn't always match reality, especially if you didn't have money to hire an orator, someone skilled in speaking your defense. You keep walking, now tracing the marks left on the floor, long, shallow lines. Maybe the dragging of chains. Maybe benches pushed back and forth for decades. Hard to say. Historians still argue about which areas of Roman prisons were used for waiting and which were purely for holding. Some point to architectural features. Thicker walls, different masonry. Others say it's all guesswork. The truth may never be certain. But what is certain is that waiting for Roman justice wasn't peaceful. Prisoners might be shuffled from here out into the forum in chains, only to be told their trial was postponed. Or worse, that no magistrate was available that day. That was common. Imagine standing all morning in the blazing Roman sun, ankles shackled, only to be sent back into the darkness because the judge decided to leave early for lunch. You pause by another doorway now. Inside, it's different. Larger with higher ceilings. A small grate in the upper wall lets in a thin shaft of light, flickering with dust. It could have been a preparation room, used before moving prisoners to trial. Or perhaps an execution staging area. No definitive records say for sure. Roman justice wasn't about rehabilitation. It wasn't about second chances. For the most part, crimes were divided sharply. Fines for minor offenses, exile, or corporal punishment for worse. And for the gravest crimes, murder, treason, rebellion, it meant death. What's curious is how public it all was. Trials often drew crowds, not in the hushed, somber way of modern courts, but more like open-air theater. People leaned on columns, watching accused men stand before stern-faced magistrates. Witnesses might step forward. The accuser would make their case, often with grand speeches full of rhetorical flourishes. You move slowly around the room, imagining the sounds that would have filled these spaces. Chains scraping on stone, quiet murmurs of prisoners awaiting word of their fate. And then silence again as everyone was dragged back to their cells, still waiting. Not all prisoners got a trial at all. Political prisoners, especially during the more unstable periods of Roman history, could simply be held indefinitely under orders from the emperor or senate. Names forgotten, lives erased. No speeches, no judgments, just silence. You lean against one of the thicker columns now, letting the weight of it settle against your back. The stone is cool, even this deep in the complex. You wonder how many prisoners leaned in this exact spot, heads down, eyes closed, trying not to think about how long they'd been here. There's something strangely cruel about Roman efficiency. On the one hand, the city ran with a kind of clockwork precision, grain shipments scheduled down to the hour, legions marching by strict timetables. But when it came to human lives stuck in places like this, that precision broke down completely. One story sticks in your mind, the case of Gaius Rabirius, accused of treason centuries ago. He spent years awaiting trial, shuffled between holding cells and tribunals, his fate decided as much by politics as by law. Some historians argue his case was a show trial from the start. Others believe it reflected the deeper flaws in Rome's system, an empire too large to handle its own machinery of justice cleanly. You straighten up again, walking now toward another archway ahead. Each step echoes longer in this part of the building. The floor shifts subtly beneath your feet, old flagstones worn so smooth they feel like glass. And suddenly, you step into a final chamber, one with a raised stone platform at its center. This is rare. An in-prison tribunal room? Or just a place where guards announce decisions? No one's sure, but archaeologists have found similar structures elsewhere in ancient Roman prisons, always sparking debate. Maybe this was where a guard stood reading out names, or where minor judgments were handed down. Imagine a soldier standing up there, voice echoing off stone walls, calling out sentences while shackled prisoners stared up, faces blank from hunger and exhaustion. Exile. Fine. Execution. No appeals, no explanations. You stand still in the middle of that room for a long moment, letting your breath slow. It feels like every stone is still waiting to echo the next verdict. Roman justice was a strange balance of spectacle and silence. Out there in the streets, people cheered or jeered as verdicts were announced. But in here, behind thick stone walls, it was just waiting. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be remembered. Or, just as often, waiting to be forgotten. You step into a smaller, colder chamber now, quieter than the rest, if that's even possible. There's no torch burning here. No visible sign that this space was meant to hold anything or anyone. And yet, it's the most infamous part of all. This is the Tullianum. In ancient texts, Roman writers mention it with a kind of hollow respect. The Tullianum wasn't just another prison cell. It was Rome's execution pit, its quiet final stop for enemies of the state. And now that you're standing here, you can see why. The ceiling lowers just slightly, the walls rougher and colder to the touch. And there, set into the floor in the center of the room, is what looks like a well without water. A circular stone opening about shoulder width across, dropping down into total darkness. It's not a well, though. It's a dungeon within a dungeon. A bottle-shaped chamber dug beneath the floor, smooth-walled so no one could climb back up. Prisoners were either lowered down with ropes or simply pushed through the opening and left to fall the short drop into darkness below. You crouch by the edge now, peering down. The air rising up from the pit smells old, thicker than anywhere else you've been tonight, like cold stone mixed with dust and rusted iron. Historians have measured the depth, just deep enough to trap a person without killing them outright. Which was the point. This wasn't about long-term imprisonment. A Tullianum was for condemned prisoners, foreign kings defeated in battle, traitors to the Senate, political enemies no longer needed alive. No one escaped from here, and few were meant to live long enough to try. Most executions happened down there, in silence, without crowds or speeches. Just a guard and an order. Some accounts say prisoners were strangled. Others say they were simply left there to starve in the dark. Historians still debate which was more common. But standing here now, feeling the quiet weight of that darkness, it doesn't really matter. The walls around you don't carry echoes like the other rooms did. There's a strange muffled quality to the sound in here, as if the space itself refuses to remember what happened. You step back slowly from the edge, rising again into the stillness. The opening stays there behind you, unchanged, waiting. No plaque, no monument, just a hole in the stone. The darkest cell in Rome. You step back into the corridor, and this time the silence feels heavier. It's not just the chill seeping through the stone, or the faint scent of rust and old straw lingering in the corners. It's the hour itself. Somewhere far above these walls, beyond the Forum and its marble columns, night is falling over Rome. And in here, beneath layers of stone and iron, that change is felt in an entirely different way. There's no window to catch the fading light, no torch lit to mark the passage of the hours anymore. The last flickering flame you passed is now just a stub of ember clinging stubbornly to life, casting a weak orange halo that hardly touches the floor. You pause next to it, instinctively cupping your hand near the light, not for warmth, but because there's something deeply human about clinging to whatever small flame you can find when darkness creeps in. Roman prisons didn't follow a schedule like the world outside. Guards might change shifts, or they might not. It depended on mood, on politics, or simply on whether the prisoners inside were important enough to watch closely. But as the city above settled into its night rhythms, market stalls closed, villas locked, the quieter hum of dinner conversations fading, down here, things simply stopped moving. You take a slow breath, noticing how even your own footsteps feel louder now. Each tap of your sandal echoes off the walls just a little longer. You can imagine prisoners curling up in corners, pulling tattered cloaks or tunics tighter around themselves as the air grows colder, stone leaching away whatever warmth the body tries to hold on to. And there's another detail you might not expect. Roman prisons didn't have lamps burning through the night. Oil cost money. Light was considered a luxury, even for those awaiting trial. Once night fell, most cells were left in total darkness. The kind so complete that even if you pressed your hand right against your face, you wouldn't see a thing. Just black. That wasn't by accident. It was part of the system. A silent way of reminding prisoners they were truly cut off. You pause by a cell door now, running your hand lightly along the iron studs that hold its frame together. The wood is splintered, but solid. A few flakes of rust fall off under your touch. Inside, you can just make out the shape of shackles lying abandoned on the floor. Empty now, but still waiting in a way. As the minutes stretch on, you become aware of how deeply quiet everything is. No voices, no shuffling chains. Not even the soft scurry of rats anymore. Just the occasional drip of water from somewhere deep within the walls, falling in slow, measured beats like the ticking of a clock that no one winds anymore. You walk a little farther down, letting your fingertips trail along the wall, feeling its uneven texture. Rough stone in some places, smoother where centuries of hands have worn it down. It's a small thing, but somehow it reminds you that people once stood exactly where you are now, waiting, listening to the same quiet drip, watching the same flickering shadows until there was nothing left but sleep. Or trying to sleep, at least. That's something most Roman prisoners didn't get much of. There are accounts from ancient writers describing how men in prison slept in shifts, afraid of theft, punishment, or worse. And that's without mentioning the cold. Tufa stone traps heat during the day, but by night it bleeds it all back out again. In winter, especially, these walls would have been like ice. You pass another doorway, this one narrower, barely wide enough for one person. Inside is a small cell, half filled with crumbling straw. You can almost picture it. A prisoner curled up in the corner, head against the wall, eyes shut tight against the dark, hoping to see sunlight again. Historians still debate whether Roman prisoners kept track of days or let time slip away entirely. Some say prisoners carved tallies into the walls to mark the passing weeks. Others suggest they simply lost count, letting each night blur into the next until days became meaningless. You stand there a moment longer, and as if on cue, the last ember from the torch behind you dies out. There's no sudden pop of flame or hiss of smoke, just a soft sigh of heat fading, and then nothing. Total dark. You stay still, letting your eyes adjust to nothing. There's something strange about that. Modern life is filled with tiny lights, street lamps, glowing windows, even the faint green dot of a digital clock. But here, there's nothing. Just stone and air, and the steady beat of your own pulse echoing in your ears. A part of you wants to whisper, maybe just to break the quiet. But even now, that feels wrong. Like speaking out loud would wake something best left sleeping. You take a step forward, carefully now, arms out slightly to feel your way. It's disorienting. One step, another. You count them without realizing it, pacing slowly through the dark. This is what it must have felt like to the prisoners locked away here after sundown. Pacing, counting, waiting. It's hard not to wonder how many names were lost this way. Records from Rome's golden age are full of emperors and senators, generals and poets. But the prisoners? Most were never written down. Their trials, if they happened at all, left no trace. Only the quiet echo of footsteps in the dark, long after their voices had gone silent. And that's the part that lingers as you finally find the next archway, fingers brushing against cold stone. A final quiet thought that settles deeper than all the history books ever really admit. The Roman Empire was famous for its monuments. The Colosseum, the aqueducts, the great marble temples. But beneath all of it were places like this, hidden, forgotten, silent. Night falls behind these bars, and no one in the city above notices. The same stars shine down on Rome's palaces and on its darkest cells. Two worlds stacked one on top of the other, one full of gold and wine, the other full of iron and silence. And as you step through that final doorway, leaving the last of the prison's corridors behind, the air shifts again. Warmer now, a faint breeze. Because above you, the city of Rome is waiting, and with it, the next part of the story. One emperor's name still echoes from those marble walls. Nero, mad, brilliant, dangerous. His story casts just as long a shadow as these prison walls do. Now, let's follow it. When you finally emerge from the corridors beneath the Forum, the air feels entirely different. It is not just a matter of stepping from shadow into open sky. The very atmosphere presses against your skin with a new kind of weight. There is no cool night breeze waiting for you here. Instead, heat coils in the air like a living thing, wrapping itself around your neck, heavy and insistent. Above you, the sky is no longer dark. It glows, a deep, unnatural orange that bleeds out in every direction, painting the edges of marble columns and tiled rooftops in flickering shades of copper and black. You stand still for a moment, absorbing the scale of it. Across the rooftops and temple fronts, thick plumes of smoke roll like waves. It does not come from one source, but from many, all blending together until it feels as though the entire city is breathing out fire. The smell is not sharp like a single house burning. It is broader, heavier. Timber, oil, fabric, grain, all of it feeding the blaze. Your tunic clings to your skin, damp, not just with sweat, but with the fine layer of ash drifting down around you like strange, dirty snow. To your left, a group of citizens huddle beneath the colonnade of the Basilica Julia. Their faces are half hidden in shadow, but you can see the tension in their bodies. No one speaks loudly. They whisper, passing words back and forth like fragile objects. You catch only fragments as you walk past. Mention of Nero, of fires starting in places too far apart to be coincidence. Historians still discuss those first whispers today. Some believe they were nothing more than panic looking for a cause. Others argue that even before the flames reached their height, ordinary Romans suspected something deliberate was at work. Moving forward, you find yourself on the Via Sacra, that broad stretch of road cutting through the Forum's heart. Under normal circumstances, it is a place for processions and parades. Tonight, it is choked with debris and people carrying bundles on their backs. One man staggers past you holding a rolled-up carpet, trailing smoke and embers from its fringes. Another woman clutches a bronze lamp in one hand and a basket of bread in the other. Neither spares you a glance. Everyone's eyes are fixed on the same point, the rooftops beyond the Forum, where the flames leap higher with each passing moment. You continue walking, weaving between broken carts and discarded bundles, until you reach the steps of the Temple of Saturn. From here, the view sharpens. The Palatine Hill rises in the near distance, its silhouette strangely untouched by flame. That is where the Emperor's palace sits. While so much of the city crumbles into ash and ruin, the Domus Transitoria remains dark and silent above it all. You stand there watching, unable to ignore the contrast. Marble columns standing tall and cool against a sky painted with fire. The ground beneath your feet shudders lightly, not from earthquake, but from the collapse of another building somewhere beyond sight. A hollow crash echoes through the streets, followed by a rising chorus of shouting. It is not frantic. Not yet. There is still too much disbelief in the air. People do not expect their city, Rome, center of the world, to burn like this. But already, the back of their minds, they must know. There is no fire brigade. At least, not in the way you might imagine. Rome's vigils, watchmen, and bucket carriers exist. But against something this large, they are nothing more than a formality. Men with wooden ladders and leather pails running through the streets, hopelessly outmatched by walls of flame. You see a few now, moving in small groups, axes slung over their shoulders. Their faces are smeared with soot. Their expressions are as grim as the stones beneath their feet. Crossing the forum, you hear clearer voices now. Two senators, their togas darkened by ash, stand beneath the arch of Septimius Severus, arguing in low, clipped tones. One insists the fire began in the shops by the Circus Maximus. The other shakes his head, voice rising with frustration, claiming it was started deliberately further north. Neither mentions the emperor directly, but his name is there, sitting unspoken in the spaces between their words. It is at this moment that the rumors begin to feel heavier than the smoke. Nero's name spreads through the crowd like sparks carried on wind. One man walking beside you mutters it under his breath, eyes flickering upward toward the Palatine. Another woman spits onto the stones and whispers, "He sings while we burn." That particular detail will live on for centuries. Historians debate it endlessly, whether Nero truly stood on a balcony or a private stage, performing poetry as Rome fell to ashes. No one can say with certainty, yet the image is hard to shake. You imagine it now, lyre in hand, golden robe shining in firelight, voice rising above the roar of flame. Leaving the forum, you follow a stream of people heading toward the Tiber. Families carry what little they can, statues of household gods, loaves of bread wrapped in cloth, even small animals tucked under their arms. The farther you walk, the thicker the ash becomes. It settles in your hair, fills the folds of your tunic, coats your tongue with a bitter metallic taste. The heat even blocks away from the fire's core, presses against your skin like a living hand. You pass an old man sitting alone on a low stone wall, head bowed, hands resting on a wooden staff. He does not move as the crowd flows around him. His sandals are covered in ash, his robe singed at the hem. You wonder if he is waiting for someone, or simply too tired to move anymore. Further ahead, the Esquiline Hill rises, one of the few places untouched by flame so far. From its crest, you pause and turn back. The entire city stretches out below you, and it is impossible not to feel small standing there, watching it all unfold. Streets you walked earlier now swallowed entirely. Market stalls gone. Roof tiles crashing down in sparks and embers. The skyline flickers like a dream fading into nightmare. And still, above it all, the imperial palace stands untouched. Cool, silent, waiting. That is where the story bends next. Toward marble halls and gilded ceilings. Toward Nero himself, waiting behind those tall, silent walls. By the time you reach the lower slopes of the Palatine Hill, the fire's glow still stretches behind you, painting long shadows against the cobblestones. But here, close to the Emperor's own gates, things feel quieter. Not calm exactly. There's still the faint crackle of burning wood carried on the wind, the low murmur of distant voices, but there's an unnatural stillness too, the kind that only exists when power and fear meet. You step through a wide archway flanked by tall columns. These are not the weather-worn stones of the Forum or the cramped alleyways where families fled from flame. These are polished marble pillars, their surfaces so smooth they catch even the faintest flicker of torchlight. Ahead, vast bronze doors stand partially open, as if someone meant to close them, but never quite finished the task. And beyond those doors stretches the entrance hall of Nero's Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It is called the Golden House for a reason. The scale hits you first, not in crowded, busy ways like a marketplace, but in sheer size and emptiness. Wide corridors stretch out in every direction, floored in colored marble mosaics so finely inlaid they shimmer beneath your feet like water. Even now, walking in silence, you catch reflections of yourself in polished stone, small, distorted figures trailing behind you. The air inside is cool, and that alone feels disorienting. Rome outside burns. Ash covers the rooftops. Yet here, beneath gilded ceilings and painted frescoes, everything holds steady. You pause in the main atrium, letting your gaze drift upward. The dome above is covered in tiny tiles, some gold leaf, some painted with swirling patterns in blue and crimson. Historians argue about the exact dimensions of this place. Some records claim the Golden House stretched across more than 300 acres, complete with gardens, artificial lakes, entire streets lined with colonnades. What survives now is just a fragment, but even a fragment is enough to overwhelm. To your left, a hallway branches off into shadow, lined with statues set in niches along the walls. They stand frozen mid-stride, marble gods and heroic emperors rendered silent and pale against the flickering torchlight. Their eyes seem to follow you as you move deeper into the palace. And here is the strangest part. There are no servants bustling past you, no guards standing watch, no sounds of music or laughter echoing from distant rooms. Just your own footsteps on polished stone. You step through an open archway and find yourself in a room where the walls shimmer with gold leaf and bright pigment. It feels alive, almost, as though if you turned quickly enough, you might catch someone standing behind you, watching from a doorway or peering down from a hidden balcony. But there's no one there. Only empty air and the scent of cool marble dust. This would have been the heart of Nero's private world, a place not just for living, but for performing his power in ways no other emperor had dared. According to surviving accounts, the Domus Aurea contained banquet halls with ceilings designed to open and release showers of rose petals onto the guests below. Historians still debate whether that detail is entirely true or a later embellishment, but the architecture makes it seem possible. You move along another corridor, this one curving gently to the right. Every few steps, you pass more elaborate decorations, rooms painted entirely in deep blue, others in bright vermilion, all accented with gold. The designs are intricate, but worn. You notice faded places where paint has flaked away, leaving pale scars across the walls. And then, without warning, you step into a room larger than the others. Its ceiling arches high overhead in a smooth curve, and in the center stands a wide marble platform. This would have been a dining space once. You can imagine it now. Low couches arranged in a circle, guests reclining while servants move silently among them, carrying dishes of honeyed figs, roasted game birds, bowls of wine thick with spice and resin. Yet standing here now, all of that feels impossibly far away. You place a hand against the nearest column. The surface is cool and smooth beneath your fingers. Even now, there are traces of gold leaf clinging to the stone, catching the light in thin, wavering lines. You follow them with your gaze, watching as they spiral upward and vanish into shadow. At the far end of the hall, there's a doorway that looks newer somehow, less worn. The wood is unpainted, the bronze handle still gleaming beneath a thin layer of dust. You hesitate, then step forward to push it open. The hinges groan softly, an old sound, but not unpleasant. Beyond lies another chamber, smaller but no less elaborate. This one is circular, with a domed ceiling painted in swirling patterns of stars and clouds. According to some records, this may have been Nero's private performance room, a space where he recited poetry and played music to a select circle of guests. You stand in the center now, tilting your head back to take in the ceiling's full design. And again, that strange silence presses in. It feels heavier here, not just quiet, but deliberate. Some historians suggest that after Nero's death, the Golden House was sealed up by later emperors, its vast halls filled with earth and stone, as if trying to erase its very existence. And standing here, in this quiet, echoing chamber, you can understand why. Power expressed on this scale feels dangerous, too large to be controlled, even by those who inherit it. You turn slowly, letting your footsteps echo off the curved walls one last time. Marble underfoot, gold leaf clinging to the shadows. And outside, beyond the palace gates, the sky still burns. You step back through the wide bronze doors of the Golden House and into a side corridor where the air feels cooler, quieter, heavier somehow. Gone are the grand open halls meant for guests and performances. Now the space is narrow, the marble floors dull down into something less decorative, more functional. This is not the part of Nero's palace meant for showing off. This is the part where power coils inward on itself. The torchlight flickers against painted walls, and each step you take seems louder than the last. As you walk deeper, you notice smaller chambers branching off left and right. Private rooms, no doubt once filled with polished bronze mirrors, perfumed oil jars, rolls of scrolls. But now, they sit empty and silent. You keep moving forward, and the thought begins to settle quietly in the back of your mind. How long did Nero walk these halls like this? Not as an emperor basking in applause, but as a man looking over his shoulder. The stories are clear enough. By the later years of his reign, Nero's paranoia was as famous as his love of performance. No one was safe from suspicion. Friends, senators, generals, even family. He wore the purple robe of power, yes, but beneath it lived constant fear. You picture it now. Nero moving through these very halls late at night, surrounded by servants and guards, yet never quite able to trust any of them. You pause before a tall doorway, its bronze hinges darkened with age. Beyond it lies a small courtyard, enclosed on all sides by high walls painted in deep red and gold. At its center, a fountain trickles faintly. Or rather, it did. The basin is dry now, filled with dust and fallen plaster, but the outline is still clear. A circular marble pool surrounded by low benches. It was in quiet places like this, away from the public eye, where Nero made many of his darkest decisions. Arrest orders, secret trials, executions arranged without a word spoken outside these walls. The power Nero held was absolute. But absolute power, as history often shows, rarely makes a man sleep easily. You move along the courtyard's edge now, running your hand lightly along the smooth stone railing. Beyond the far wall, you hear a faint noise, your own footsteps echoing back, or something else entirely. A guard's step, a whisper from another hallway, or perhaps just imagination playing its usual tricks in empty palaces. Historians still debate just how deeply Nero's paranoia ran. Some sources paint him as merely cautious, reacting to real conspiracies, like the Pisonian plot, an actual attempt to overthrow him led by senators and equestrians. Others describe him as nearly unhinged, ordering deaths simply because of a glance, a rumor, a bad feeling. And as you walk now through another corridor lined with purple-draped alcoves, it's easy to believe both versions. You imagine Nero here, seated alone in a small room filled with incense smoke, sending scribes running through the night with fresh lists of names to be arrested. No trial necessary. A single word from the man in the purple robe was enough. You step into a smaller chamber now, this one different from the others. The walls are covered in thin layers of polished bronze instead of paint, turning every flicker of torchlight into a dull reflection. A room built for watching, or being watched. In the center stands a narrow table, plain marble, nothing decorative about it. On its surface, faint scratches mark where scrolls might once have been unfurled, edicts signed, names crossed off. And on the far side, against the wall, a bronze stool still sits, as though waiting for its occupant to return. You cross the room slowly, each step echoing against the bronze-paneled walls, and rest your hand lightly on the edge of the table. It's cool beneath your fingers, smooth except where time has left shallow grooves. Here is where decisions were made, lives weighed and measured like so many coins. And the strangest part of all is how quiet it feels, as if the weight of all those vanished voices has been pressed flat into silence. You imagine Nero seated here, purple robe draped over one shoulder, hands drumming quietly against the marble as his mind spirals through suspicions. Who is loyal? Who isn't? Who might be plotting behind his back right now? By the final years of his rule, paranoia governed nearly every corner of Nero's world. Servants were watched, friends interrogated, entire families erased by a single order. Historians note with a kind of grim fascination how many senators were accused of treason during this period, many on the thinnest of evidence. You step back now, leaving the bronze-walled chamber behind, moving down another narrow hallway lit by small alcove lamps. Their oil burns low and steady, casting a warm, muted glow on the painted walls. But even that soft light doesn't fully erase the cold creeping in around the edges. One detail catches your eye as you pass: a fragment of writing scratched into the plaster near the base of the wall. It's faded almost to nothing, but you can just make out the shape of a name, or perhaps a warning. Historians still wonder whether these faint marks were left by servants or guards or guests trapped too long in Nero's orbit. Quiet graffiti, hidden beneath layers of gold and marble. At last, the corridor widens again. You step into another enclosed courtyard. Above, the sky has deepened into full night. The city beyond still glows faintly on the horizon, though most of the fire's direct light has faded. And here, standing beneath the open sky once more, it strikes you just how much Nero's world was shaped by invisible walls. Not the marble and bronze you can see, but the unseen barriers that paranoia builds around a man's mind. Friend or enemy, servant or senator, it made no difference. Everyone was a threat if power felt fragile enough. You stand quietly for a moment longer, letting the night air settle over your skin before turning back toward the palace interior. The halls stretch on ahead of you, as silent and watchful as ever. There is still more to see. You step away from the quiet courtyards and golden chambers, moving back through those long corridors where every polished surface once reflected power, now dulled by dust. The echoes of your footsteps follow you with steady rhythm, but tonight the silence feels thinner somehow, not as solid as before, almost like the marble itself is holding its breath, listening to something distant that hasn't yet arrived. By now, the fire's glow outside has ebbed into a softer orange along the horizon. But what replaces it isn't calm. It's something else entirely. Unrest, quiet at first, but building. You step into another hall, this one lined with statues so tall they seem to scrape the curved ceiling. Between each column, faint torchlight flickers, casting long shadows that stretch and shift as you walk past. And from somewhere beyond the palace walls, there's a new sound. Not the crackling of fire, not the usual distant clatter of carts or footsteps. It's voices. Soft at first, carried on the wind like murmurs. Then sharper, more distinct. Crowds gathering in the streets below the hill. Not in panic now, but in protest. You pause for a moment at a wide window arch, looking out over the city. From here, you can see the rooftops stretching away beneath the night sky, some still smoking from the recent fire, others dark and silent. And beneath those rooftops, along the major roads, torches move like slow rivers of flame. Groups of men gathered in tight knots, their words rising together in low, angry waves. The revolt has begun. You move along the gallery's edge now, following the curve of the palace's upper walkways, letting your hand drift along the smooth marble railing. The air feels sharper, colder than it did before, as though the walls themselves have started to notice what's coming. Nero's hold on the city is no longer absolute. For all his gold-leafed halls and hidden chambers, there is something out there even he cannot smother. The voice of a city tired of burning. Historians still debate exactly how early the revolts against Nero truly began. Some say they were building for months, festering in the Senate, whispered among generals in distant provinces. Others argue it was the fire that tipped things beyond the point of return, making even ordinary citizens willing to speak openly against the emperor. What's certain is that by the time the smoke cleared, discontent was louder than ever. You step through another doorway now, into a room with no windows, just smooth walls painted with swirling vines and dark red patterns. This was once a place for private audiences, perhaps, or secret councils. You can almost see it, Nero seated in the center, robe trailing over the marble bench, listening as messengers brought news of rebellion spreading through the provinces. Galba in Hispania, Vindex in Gaul, names that echoed through Rome like warning bells. One by one, governors and generals declaring open revolt, refusing to send taxes, refusing to acknowledge Nero's authority. And with every message, the quiet must have settled heavier over these walls, because this was no longer about pleasing the Senate or entertaining guests with poetry. It was survival now. You pause again, letting that thought settle as you trace one finger along the smooth, cold surface of the bench. The silence in this room feels thicker than before, the kind that knows the difference between rumor and reality. Back in the halls now, you notice something else. Fewer lamps burning, as though the palace itself has begun to close in on itself. Fewer servants moving through the corridors, fewer guards posted at the corners. Even power wrapped in gold can feel when its grip begins to loosen. You find yourself on a balcony next, overlooking the forum from high above. From here, the voices carry clearer. Torches flickering in the streets, banners rising among the crowds. And the chants now are unmistakable, too loud to be dismissed as rumor. They call for Nero's name to be stricken from the records. They call for the Senate to act. From this height, the city looks almost peaceful, but you know better. Beneath those quiet rooftops, in villas and marketplaces, the fabric of Rome is fraying thread by thread. One senator's house attacked, another merchant accused of aiding the emperor. Old alliances breaking apart as fast as they once formed. You stand there listening, letting the cold marble of the balcony rail press against your palms, wondering how long the Golden House can stand before that tide finally reaches its gates. Historians often ask why Nero stayed as long as he did, why he didn't flee sooner, why he didn't try to crush the revolts outright. Some say he truly believed that people would never turn against him. Others suggest he simply didn't see it coming until it was too late. But standing here now, you can sense the weight of that choice. To stay, to listen, to pretend the city still belonged to him. The voices below rise again, louder this time, echoing through the marble arches and temple fronts. The kind of sound that doesn't fade easily. And in that moment, the palace feels smaller. Not because the walls have shrunk, but because the world outside has grown too large to ignore. You step back from the balcony slowly, letting your footsteps echo once more through the empty halls. Lamps flicker low along the walls, their light too thin to push back the dark completely now. And somewhere behind all this silence, Nero waits. Not as a figure in control anymore, but as a man listening to the city's voice, rising louder than his own. You keep walking, leaving behind the quiet marble halls of the Golden House and stepping into the cool night air once again. But now, the air feels thinner, not just physically, but in mood. The world around you feels drained of its usual weight, as though all the golden ceilings and sculpted corridors behind you no longer matter. From here, the city stretches out below, but it isn't the same Rome you stepped into before. This is a city where the emperor no longer holds sway. His name has already started to fade in the mouths of senators, soldiers, and ordinary people alike. You can feel it in the silence hanging over the Palatine Hill, in the way no guards stand at the palace gates anymore, no household staff moving through the outer courtyards. By this hour, Nero has already fled. Historians record the event in quick, tight sentences. Sometime after midnight, Nero left the palace dressed in a simple tunic, hiding beneath a cloak, with only a handful of freedmen and loyal servants following behind. But those short accounts do not capture the real shape of the moment. They don't tell you what it felt like to walk these same stone paths, knowing Rome had turned its back. You pass through one final arched gate now, the palace behind you fading into darkness. Ahead stretches the Via Nomentana, a road that once carried merchant carts, festival processions, and the Imperial Guard. Tonight, it is empty except for your own footsteps and the quiet echoes of sandals striking stone. The path is uneven in places. Cobblestones worn smooth from decades of traffic glint faintly beneath the moonlight, their cracks filled with dust and ash from the city's recent fires. Even now, as you walk, the smell of burned timber and oil lingers faintly in the air, a reminder of what has just passed. According to some sources, Nero's first plan was not to flee the city entirely, but to take refuge in the house of one of his few remaining allies, Fian, a freedman whose villa stood beyond the city's northern edge. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't even particularly grand, but it was far enough from the Forum and the Senate to offer a brief kind of shelter. You follow the same road now, your pace steady, your hands brushing against low garden walls and weathered iron gates along the way. Each villa you pass stands dark, its windows shuttered, its doors bolted. No lamps burn in the courtyards. No servants linger near the gates. It's as if the entire city is holding its breath, waiting to see how the last act of this particular drama will play out. You walk past one villa entrance marked with a faded mosaic of a fish. Another has a half-broken marble statue standing in its garden. An emperor's bust toppled from its pedestal, face cracked clean through the middle. Symbols of power crumbling quietly in the dark. The streets grow narrower as you move farther from the Palatine. No grand archways here, no triumphal columns. Just low walls and dusty olive trees lining the edges of quiet paths. The kind of place where the emperor never bothered to walk before, but now must rely on for escape. You pause near a crossroads, resting your hand on a stone milestone that marks the edge of the city's official boundary. Past this point, the rules shift. No longer strictly within Rome's core, but not quite the countryside either. And here, according to history, is where Nero's flight slowed. Some say he stopped to catch his breath. Others suggest he hesitated, perhaps still believing there might be a last-minute reprieve, that the Senate would send word after all, begging him to return. But standing here now, it's hard to imagine. The city behind you feels too distant, too quiet, like it has already made up its mind. You keep walking. The road bends slightly uphill now, lined with taller trees that sway gently in the night breeze. Cicadas hum softly in the background, a detail that feels strangely steady, as if nature itself cares little for the rise or fall of emperors. Finally, through the trees, the outline of the villa appears. Fine's house. It is not grand. Whitewashed walls rise in a low square around a central courtyard. The entrance gate is smaller than you expect, made of plain wood, reinforced with iron strips. One of the doors hangs slightly ajar. There are no guards standing watch. No welcoming torches. Just quiet shadows and the faint scent of cypress hanging in the air. You step through the gate slowly, feeling the gravel crunch underfoot as you cross into the villa's outer courtyard. Statues stand in the corners here, small ones, not the grand marble gods of the Forum, but simpler household figures. A faun playing a flute, a seated woman holding a bowl. Their faces are worn smooth from time and weather. The villa's central hall is cool and dark. Mosaic floors stretch beneath your feet in faded colors, reds, blues, greens, their patterns blurred by dust. Along the walls, simple oil lamps flicker low, their light casting long, uneven shadows against painted frescoes. You pass through one doorway, then another, each room quieter than the last. And finally, you reach the chamber where Nero waited. A plain room, no gilded ceilings, no golden statues. Just a single marble bench near the far wall, and a narrow table where scrolls might once have been laid. Nero sat here during his final hours, head bent, hands clasped together, pacing in slow circles while the world outside turned against him. You step further in, feeling the chill of the stone beneath your feet. The walls here are painted in muted colors, dark red and black, without elaborate decoration. Practical, forgettable. According to Suetonius and Tacitus, Nero spent his last night here speaking aloud to himself, quoting from plays and poems about fallen kings and abandoned empires. One line in particular echoes through the centuries: Qualis artifex perio, what an artist dies with me. You stand quietly now, imagining those words spoken into this very air, carried along the stone walls and out, into the courtyard beyond, not as a cry of triumph, not as a final boast, but as a man's last, quiet acknowledgement that everything he built, palaces, performances, power, was ending here. You move back toward the courtyard slowly, footsteps measured and soft. Behind you, the villa falls silent again. No footsteps echo, no servants return, just the wind stirring through the olive trees outside. Rome has already moved on, and the man who once ruled it walks no longer among its marble streets. You step back through the forum's western gate, just as the first full light of morning stretches across the rooftops. The sky is washed pale, the same pale gold you've seen glinting off marble columns so many times before. But today, it feels different. The city is not the same. Rome may not pause for long when an emperor falls, but it does notice. And it does leave marks behind. Your footsteps echo through the open square, quieter now that the night's commotion has finally settled into something slower and more deliberate. It isn't just about soldiers marching or crowds gathering anymore. This is the quieter business that comes after, removing what doesn't belong. At the edge of the forum, a scaffold has been set up beside one of the great public statues. Nero's likeness, larger than life, cast in bright bronze, stands there as if nothing has changed. But already, men have begun to climb the scaffold, ropes slung over their shoulders, chisels in hand. You pause at the base of the steps leading up toward the Temple of Saturn, watching in stillness as the first hammer strikes ring out through the morning air. The statue's face is the first thing they work on. No ceremony, no quiet moment of farewell. Just practical, steady blows against the metal. Chips of bronze fall away in glinting flakes, scattering across the stone platform below like so many discarded coins. It's not a rushed process. Erasing an emperor takes patience. Rome doesn't just burn away its memories in a single night. It unwinds them carefully, methodically, as if unpicking the threads of a too bright tapestry until only blank fabric remains. That's the work you're seeing now. You walk slowly across the forum floor, noticing fresh plaster already applied to the base of other monuments, where Nero's name had once been inscribed in neat capital letters, now covered over in smooth white. Temple dedications stripped of his title, honorary arches chipped clean of his likeness. There's a word for it: damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. It wasn't reserved for every fallen ruler, only the ones Rome decided it truly needed to forget. And Nero, for all his poetry and golden palaces, for all his lyres and banquets and midnight councils, had reached that point. You pass by a group of senators now, gathered beneath a columned walkway. Their togas catch the morning light in long, pale folds, But there's no debate in their voices, no lingering arguments. The decision has been made. They speak in clipped, practical tones about grain shipments, about military appointments, not about Nero. His name doesn't come up, not even once. That's part of the process too. The speed with which power shifts from one name to the next. You pause near the rostra, where public speeches are given. The platform stands empty this morning, but you can still hear the faint echo of past voices layered into its stones. Historians still debate whether any formal announcement was made in this exact spot about Nero's death. Some say a herald read it aloud. Others claim the news simply spread from mouth to mouth, like a cold wind moving through the city. You keep walking, past fountains where the water flows clean, again after days of ash and smoke, past market stalls already being set up, bakers and olive merchants laying out their goods in neat rows as if no emperor had died overnight. Life folds itself back into the spaces where it left off, but the traces are still there, if you know where to look. You notice one as you pass near the Basilica Julia, a wall where half a fresco has been carefully scraped away. What remains is just color, shapes with no clear form. You can imagine what was once there, perhaps Nero's face among the gods, painted in gold leaf and bright crimson, now reduced to abstract patches of pigment. And further down, near the Temple of Castor and Pollux, another group of workers stands on ladders with long-handled chisels, scraping away bronze lettering from a dedication plaque. The sound is steady, rhythmic, the kind of work that might go on for days without pause. One letter at a time, one name erased until the whole surface gleams blank and ready for whoever comes next. You pause there for a long moment, watching, letting the morning light settle on your shoulders. It isn't just about removing statues or inscriptions. It's about ensuring that the shape of power looks smooth again, seamless, unbroken. Rome cannot afford sharp edges or lingering ghosts. But of course, they never fully vanish. You walk past a small alley now, tucked between two older temples. And there, scratched faintly into the stone wall, you catch a name, Nero. Not carved by a mason, not written in grand letters. Just scratched there by an ordinary hand, slanted, uneven. A memory refusing to be smoothed away completely. Historians still wonder how many marks like this remain hidden across the city. Quiet traces left by hands unwilling to forget, or perhaps unable to let go entirely. You leave the alley behind and return to the forum's main square. The sun has climbed higher now. Shadows shrink beneath columns and statues. The men on the scaffold have nearly finished their work. The bronze statue's head has been lowered to the ground, ropes straining as it settles into the dust with a dull, heavy thud. No applause, no ritual, just another task checked off the day's long list. You step closer, resting your hand lightly against the fallen bronze cheek. It's cool to the touch, sharper along the edges where hammer blows have cracked the metal open like a shell. Rome moves on. It always does. You walk back toward the Curia once more, past senators still conferring in tight groups, past merchants arranging baskets of dates and figs, past soldiers adjusting their helmets in the morning sun. And all around you, life continues exactly as it should, measured, deliberate, unbothered. The golden house will be sealed, the palace gardens divided, marble walls stripped and repurposed for other buildings. Some sections buried entirely beneath new foundations, as if they had never existed at all. But beneath all of that, below the paving stones and foundations, below the grand arches and restored facades, the city's oldest layers remain. Hidden dungeons, forgotten corridors, silent halls that no decree can fully erase. You pause beneath a marble archway as the sun reaches its full height. The air is warm now, golden dust hanging in the light. And somewhere below your feet, there are still places waiting. Quiet chambers sealed off long before Nero ever wore a crown. That's where we'll go next. beneath the forum, beneath the marble and the crowds, into the hidden dungeons waiting below. The forum feels different when you look down instead of up. Most people come here to gaze at the towering columns, the marble facades washed bright by the morning sun. But if you slow your steps, if you let your eyes wander to the stones underfoot, there's a quiet detail waiting. The smooth slabs of marble beneath your sandals don't just sit here for decoration. They cover something. You walk slowly across the open plaza, each step echoing in the early light. Around you, merchants begin setting up their stalls, folding open linen awnings, and unpacking baskets of dates, olives, loaves of bread, still warm from the ovens. Servants carry water jars from nearby wells. The senators move in pairs toward the curia, their white togas catching the breeze. Everything seems calm. But under all that calm is a second Rome. It starts with a single narrow doorway, hidden between two temples at the forum's edge. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it. There's no plaque, no marker, just a low arch set into the stone, barely tall enough to walk through without ducking. You kneel for a moment before stepping inside, fingers brushing against the iron hinges of the wooden door. Cool and rough with age. Rome above might shine in marble and gold, but this doorway reminds you how much of the city's real work happens out of sight. You step through. The air changes instantly. Warm sun vanishes. You feel cool stone pressing close on all sides. The ceiling drops just enough that you instinctively hunch your shoulders. And there it is again, that scent. Not rot, not smoke, just the deep, steady smell of damp rock layered with centuries of quiet. Your sandals scrape against the stone stairs beneath your feet as you descend. Slowly, carefully, the steps are worn smooth, not by tourists or visitors, but by thousands of quiet, unseen feet moving up and down this same path long before your time. And as you go lower, the noise from above fades. The city disappears. You are beneath the stones of power now. What stretches out ahead is no simple room. It's a network, a maze of narrow corridors and stone-walled chambers, each connected by arches that seem too low for comfort. The walls around you aren't polished like those in the forum. They're rough tufa and limestone, hand-cut with chisel marks still faintly visible in the torchlight. You pause and run your hand lightly along the surface. The grooves fit your fingertips perfectly. Historians still argue about how old these lower chambers truly are. Some say they date back to Rome's earliest days, when kings ruled instead of emperors, and the forum was little more than a wide clearing lined with huts. Others suggest the tunnels were cut during the Republic, hidden beneath basilicas and temples for official storage. But by the time of the Empire, their purpose had shifted. You step into one of the first open rooms now, a holding cell. There's no door, just a narrow archway leading in. The walls inside are plain, unpainted stone, darkened with moisture. At the far end, iron rings are bolted into the wall, their surfaces rusted to near uselessness. You pause in the center of the room, picturing it as it must have been. A man standing here, shackled to the wall. No torchlight, no window. Only the sound of water dripping steadily from a crack in the ceiling. The faintest echo of footsteps from guards above, maybe, but mostly silence. There's no straw left on the floor. No discarded pottery shards or scraps of cloth. Just smooth stone dusted with fine sand. But if you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. The quiet scratch of someone's fingernails against stone. Prisoners held here wouldn't have been left for long. These chambers weren't designed for weeks or months of captivity. They were for holding the accused before trial, or for hiding important prisoners from the public eye. You step out again and continue down the main corridor. It narrows in places until your shoulders nearly brush both walls. In others, the ceiling drops so low you have to crouch slightly as you move. One archway leads to another holding cell, then another, some larger, some smaller, a few no bigger than a closet, just enough room for a man to stand, but not to sit. And then, as you turn a corner, the ground changes under your feet. No more cut stone slabs. Just packed earth mixed with crushed gravel. It feels softer somehow, less permanent. The tunnel opens into a wider space, a long chamber lined with stone benches on either side. The ceiling arches overhead in a perfect curve, held up by thick stone ribs. Roman engineering at its quietest, its most invisible. At the far end of the chamber, you spot something unexpected. A small altar carved directly into the wall. Nothing grand, just a shallow hollow framed by faint inscriptions too worn to read clearly. You run your hand lightly along its edge, feeling the grooves left by ancient chisels. What was it for? Historians still wonder. Some say these altars were used by guards to leave offerings, small coins, bits of food, quiet prayers for safety while watching over dangerous men. Others argue prisoners themselves might have left marks here, scrawling names or curses in the stone before being taken above for judgment. You step back from the altar and walk slowly down the length of the chamber. Each step echoes longer now, the sound stretching into the dark like a rope. Another corridor branches off ahead, curving sharply to the right. You follow it, tracing your hand along the wall as you go, counting arches as you pass them. 1, 2, 3. And then the air shifts again, colder, heavier. You step into a new space, wider, taller. And here, the walls are lined not with iron rings or benches, but with thick stone blocks and set at regular intervals. These weren't just cells. These were vaults. Some held important prisoners. Others perhaps stored records or treasures hidden from the public. The forum above might shine with marble and gold, but down here, beneath the stones of power, the real business of the empire was conducted quietly, away from prying eyes. You pause once more, resting your hand against one of the thick blocks. It feels heavier than the others, cooler too. A subtle draft of air leaks through a narrow crack at its edge. Another hidden passage, perhaps sealed long ago. And that's the thing about places like this. No matter how carefully Rome builds over its past, there's always another layer waiting beneath. Another shadowed corner where history sits untouched. The forum above bustles on. Merchants shout. Coins change hands. Statues rise and fall. But down here, beneath the stones of power, nothing ever truly disappears. You move deeper into the maze of narrow halls beneath the forum now. Footsteps slow and steady as the torchlight flickers off damp stone. The air cools another notch with every few steps, sharpening into that particular kind of cold that only exists in places untouched by sunlight for years at a time. It isn't bitter or harsh. It's simply settled, permanent, the way still water feels when it hasn't been disturbed for far too long. The corridors here branch in tighter curves. Left, right, then left again. No markers, no patterns. Rome built these passages with purpose, but that purpose wasn't meant to be public knowledge. This wasn't storage for grain or weapons anymore. This was something quieter, something more deliberate. You pause at a T-shaped intersection, brushing your hand lightly along the right-hand wall. A shallow groove catches your fingers, a mark worn into the stone over centuries. Not decoration, just the slow effect of countless palms sliding along the same place, guiding themselves through the dark. The chamber ahead is lower than the others you've seen so far. You have to duck your head to step through its archway. Inside, the air feels heavier, more still. And here's the difference. Where earlier cells had signs of regular use, rings and benches and scratched marks, this room holds nothing. No iron, no altars. Just bare stone on all sides. Yet the shape is unmistakable. Rectangular, with perfectly squared corners. A cell of a different sort. A secret one. Historians still argue about these chambers. Were they meant for political prisoners, those too dangerous or too embarrassing to hold in public? Foreign kings awaiting execution? Or something else entirely? There are no clear records, no surviving scrolls, only whispers passed down through fragments of ancient texts. You move along the far wall now, fingertips tracing faint patterns. Here and there, your hand catches against rougher patches of stone, scratches, marks not meant for decoration or structure. You kneel slightly, running your fingers along the lower section of the wall until you find one of them clearly. A name, faint, but there, cut into the stone in uneven lines. Not in grand Roman capitals, but in the slanted script of a hurried hand. It isn't a senator's name or a famous general's. It's ordinary. The kind of name the forum above would forget in a day, but which still clings quietly to the stone down here. You stand again, letting the silence settle around you before moving back into the corridor. The path curves sharply to the left now, leading down a narrow slope. Steps carved directly into the rock, worn into shallow dips from years of careful use. The farther down you go, the more the air thickens. Not with smoke or dust, just with time. The walls close in closer here. And finally, the corridor opens into a larger room, square, with a low ceiling and thicker walls. The first thing you notice is the doorway, a slab of stone resting at an angle across the entrance. Not metal, not wood. Solid rock, meant to slide into place and seal off the room entirely. A secret prison. You step around the slab now, ducking into the room beyond. It feels colder here, quiet in a way that even the other chambers didn't. This is where Rome kept its forgotten. Not just criminals waiting for trial, but prisoners too valuable or too dangerous to let vanish into ordinary records. A senator accused of conspiracy. A foreign envoy held until ransom was paid. A political rival silenced before the public could learn their name. You walk slowly around the room's perimeter, hand brushing the walls again. Faint scratches here too, but fewer. These walls were smoothed deliberately, harder to mark, harder to leave a trace. You pause near the far corner, kneeling again to check the floor. There's no straw here, no pottery shards or scraps of cloth. Just smooth, packed earth layered with a fine powder of ancient dust. Historians still wonder how many such rooms existed beneath Rome. Not just beneath the Forum, but beneath temples, palaces, even ordinary homes. Rome's architects were masters at layering one purpose over another, building beauty on top of control, power hidden beneath ceremony. You step back toward the doorway, resting your hand lightly on the edge of the stone slab. It's heavier than it looks. You can imagine now how 2 or 3 guards would work together to push it into place, sealing the room off completely. No sound escaping. No light. The corridor calls you onward again. You follow its curve as it rises slightly now, leaving the deeper vaults behind. The walls here shift texture too, less rough, more deliberate. Blocks fitted together in tighter patterns, evidence of repairs and reinforcements. You pass another smaller chamber set off to one side. This one is unusual, a rounded room rather than square. Inside, there's nothing but a single low bench carved directly from the rock, circling the perimeter. A waiting room, perhaps for guards, perhaps for scribes, or perhaps for those about to be taken down into the lower vaults. Even one last moment to sit in silence before disappearing entirely. You pause there, letting the silence settle around you again. The only sound now is the faint drip of water from somewhere unseen. A steady, deliberate rhythm. The kind of sound that marks time in places where no clocks are kept. Rome above moves on with its business. Markets opening, soldiers marching, senators debating laws in clean marble halls. But here, beneath the stones of power, the city's quieter decisions were made, the ones history doesn't always record. You step back into the corridor, letting the rounded chamber fall away behind you. And for a moment, you stand completely still, listening. The quiet here feels absolute. But if you wait long enough, if you breathe slowly enough, you can almost hear the faintest echoes. The scrape of a stone slab being slid into place. The murmur of a name whispered one last time before being erased. And then silence again. You continue walking, the sound of your steps echoing quietly along stone walls that have been standing for centuries longer than most of Rome's visible monuments. It isn't just the hidden cells that make these chambers feel so deliberate. It's the structure itself. Even now, after all these years, the layout feels intentional, measured, solid in a way that no accidental tunnel or natural cave could ever be. You pause near a junction where two corridors intersect, brushing your hand lightly along the edge of a support column set into the wall. It's not just a rough-cut block. It's carefully shaped, with sharp corners and smooth sides fitted perfectly against the stone around it. And overhead, as your eyes adjust to the torchlight, you notice the ceiling curves upward slightly, an arch set into place with exact weight and balance. Roman engineering wasn't only about grand bridges and towering aqueducts. Down here, beneath the Forum, those same skills applied in silence. The same techniques that held up massive temples and public baths were used here, in these unseen places. You step forward again, running your fingers along the wall as you move. The stones aren't random. Each one is cut to fit into the next, forming a seamless layer. Tufa blocks fitted with lime mortar, arranged in rows that alternate direction for extra strength. That kind of masonry, the opus cementitium, was part of what made Roman construction legendary. Even in the dark, even in silence, the work held firm. Further along, the corridor narrows slightly, and here the ceiling drops low enough that you have to bow your head as you pass beneath another arch. The walls here show faint tool marks, curved lines from chisels, shallow notches from iron wedges used to split blocks apart. You pause to study them, fingers tracing the grooves. Historians still puzzle over how precise some of these underground spaces really were. There are records of teams of engineers and laborers sent specifically to build storage vaults and hidden cells beneath government buildings. And yet, down here, it feels more personal somehow. Less like state-sponsored architecture, and more like a secret project carried out quietly, one stone at a time. You continue down a long hall now, wider and smoother than the others. The floor here is paved with carefully laid slabs of stone rather than packed earth. And along one side, a shallow channel runs parallel to the wall. Part of an ancient drainage system, no doubt. Roman engineers thought of everything. Even down here, beneath the weight of all the Forum's marble. And stone, they planned for water runoff, for airflow, for structural support. You step carefully along the edge of the drainage channel now, glancing down into its dark hollow. There's no standing water left, just a faint layer of dust and grit, but the channel's purpose is clear. Further along, another support column rises on your left, this one different. It's thicker than the others, and around its base, small clay tiles have been fitted into the mortar. You kneel slightly to examine them more closely. The tiles bear faint maker's marks, stamped letters in Latin, identifying who made them, where they came from. That detail surprises you, standing here in silence. Rome's engineers didn't just build for function. They marked their work, leaving signatures hidden in places no ordinary citizen would ever see. Quiet proof of craftsmanship meant to last. You move on now, the corridor curving once more, and here you step into a wider chamber set directly beneath what must be one of the Forum's central plazas. The scale of it hits immediately. Thick stone columns rise from the floor to the ceiling, set at regular intervals, each one supporting the weight of everything above. This isn't just a tunnel anymore. This is structural support. Roman engineering at its quietest and most deliberate. You walk slowly between the columns now, letting your hand rest lightly against each as you pass. The surface is cool and smooth, showing barely any wear after all these centuries. You pause in the center of the room, looking up. The ceiling curves in a perfect barrel vault, a single continuous arch of stone stretching from one wall to the other, held together by nothing more than weight and balance. No modern concrete, no metal reinforcements, just stone laid against stone in perfect alignment. Historians write about how Roman vaulting techniques revolutionized architecture, but standing here beneath the Forum, it doesn't feel revolutionary. It feels inevitable. Like, of course, they would have done it this way, quietly, precisely. And then, as you move forward again, you notice another feature built into the far wall. A series of narrow openings set high up near the ceiling. Ventilation shafts, designed to carry air from above down into these lower levels, keeping the air from growing too stale or heavy. You step closer, tilting your head to look up through one of the shafts. From here, you can see nothing but darkness. No light reaches this deep, but you know where it leads. Up toward the Forum floor, up toward the marble paving stones where the city continues on without noticing. Even now, centuries after these chambers were first cut, those shafts still work. The faintest breath of cooler air moves through them, stirring the torchlight gently as you stand in silence. And that's the true weight of this place. Not just hidden prisons or forgotten rooms, but the sheer permanence of it. Rome built to last. Not just above ground where everyone could see, but here, in the dark, beneath the stones of power. You turn slowly now, walking back toward the narrower corridors, footsteps steady against the smooth stone floor. The air feels colder again, but not in an uncomfortable way. Just deliberate, settled. Above you, life continues. Markets open, processions march, statues rise and fall. But down here, beneath it all, the quiet work of Roman engineering holds firm, as steady now as it was 2,000 years ago. The corridor ahead narrows again, and as you step forward, your sandals scrape softly across the stone floor, stirring up fine dust that hangs in the air like powdered bone. These tunnels have changed shape as you've moved deeper. What began as deliberate, Roman-built vaults now feel less planned, more layered, as if history piled itself on in uneven waves. It's quieter down here, heavier somehow, and with each step, that sense sharpens, not just because of the silence, but because of what lies tucked along the walls and alcoves. Relics, not grand marble statues or polished bronze. What you find down here is smaller, stranger, the kind of objects that never make it into public records or temple inventories. You pause at the first of them now. A broken oil lamp resting on a shallow stone shelf carved directly into the wall. Its handle is snapped clean off, the clay blackened from flame and time alike. You run your fingers gently across its edge. The lamp is simple, unmarked by any imperial seal or artisan's name. The kind of object used by someone unimportant. A guard, maybe, or a prisoner. And that's what lingers about this place. These objects aren't offerings to the gods. They're quiet traces of ordinary lives. Things left behind, not because they were sacred, but because there was nowhere else for them to go. You move along the wall now, and soon the corridor opens into a wider chamber. The torch in your hand throws pale light across rows of stone shelves, carved into both sides of the room. Each shelf holds something. Shards of pottery, rusted iron rings, lengths of cracked leather so dry they flake at a touch. Nothing valuable, nothing ceremonial. But together, all of it forms a kind of quiet museum, Rome's forgotten basement. Historians still debate the purpose of these lower chambers. Some insist they were part of the prison's storage system, places to keep tools, spare shackles, iron nails for repairs. Others suggest something stranger, that these rooms served as unofficial reliquaries, holding the personal effects of those imprisoned here. A kind of record, not written in scrolls, but in things. You crouch beside one shelf now, spotting a small bronze clasp half buried in dust. It looks like it once held a strap or cord. The metal is green with age, marked by tiny spots of corrosion, but its shape is unmistakable. You lift it carefully, feeling the weight in your palm. Lighter than you'd expect, but solid. What kind of person left this here? A prisoner sentenced to exile, stripped of his belongings before being led away? A guard placing it on the shelf for safekeeping, only to forget it forever? The city above wouldn't have kept that kind of detail in its ledgers, but the clasp remembers. You rise again and move toward the back of the chamber. Here, the shelves grow narrower, the objects smaller still. In one corner, half hidden beneath a crumbling fragment of roof tile, sits a wooden comb. Its teeth are broken, worn smooth on one side as though rubbed over and over by nervous fingers. You brush away the dust gently, exposing the full shape of it. No one writes about things like this in history books. Statues and temples, yes. Laws and decrees. But not the everyday tools left behind by the people living under those laws. You stand quietly for a moment, letting your breath slow in the heavy air. The stone walls absorb the silence, each groove and notch layered with quiet weight. And then, beyond the shelves, you notice something else. Another doorway set into the far wall, lower than the others, almost hidden. You move toward it, ducking slightly as you step through. The space beyond is even smaller, a half-room, cut roughly from the rock. No shelves here, just a single stone bench carved along the far side, its surface worn smooth from use. At first glance, it looks empty. But then your torchlight catches something tucked into the corner near the floor. A lump of metal no larger than your fist. You kneel beside it, brushing away dust. It's a bronze figurine. A lion again, crouched low, its tail curled along its back. This one is heavier than the others you've seen. More carefully made. The surface is pitted with age, but the details remain. Claws, a curling mane, sharp teeth bared in a silent snarl. Why would something like this be left here? Historians still wonder. Some believe these small figurines were carried as protective charms by prisoners or guards. Others suggest they marked special cells, places where particularly important captives were held. You lift the figurine slowly, turning it in your hand. It feels cool and solid, its weight surprisingly steady. There's no inscription, no identifying mark. Just a quiet relic sitting in a quiet room, outlasting the empire that placed it here. You set it back down gently, standing again. The stone bench feels colder than before, as if the room holds its own pocket of winter, sealed off from the form's sunlit stones above. As you step back through the low doorway into the larger chamber, the relics seem to shimmer faintly in the torchlight. Oil lamps, iron tools, pottery fragments. Together, they tell a story no marble monument ever could. Not about emperors or conquests, but about the quieter moments Rome tried to forget. You move back toward the main corridor, footsteps steady against the stone floor. The air feels heavier again, layered with the weight of those forgotten things left quietly on their shelves. And here's the thing, even as Rome rises and falls, these objects remain, not because anyone cares about them directly, but because stone holds memory better than paper, better than song. You pause once more at the edge of the chamber, glancing back. The shelves stretch into shadow now, disappearing into darkness. And all those small, quiet relics sit waiting, as steady and unmoving as the city's grandest temples. Above, the sun climbs higher. Merchants open shopfronts. Soldiers adjust their helmets on morning patrol. Senators gather in marble halls to write new laws. But down here, beneath the stones of power, the strange relics left behind keep silent watch. The hallway before you opens into another wide chamber, its ceiling arching higher than anything you've passed so far. Your steps slow instinctively. There's no grand entrance or sign carved above the archway, but the scale of this space speaks for itself. This was no simple cell block or storage vault. It feels deliberate, constructed with a specific purpose. And as the flicker of your torch stretches ahead, that purpose settles into place with quiet certainty. This was a tribunal chamber, not the kind held beneath open sky, where senators and magistrates sat in white-robed rows while citizens gathered to listen. This was judgment rendered in silence, justice stripped of spectacle. You stand still for a moment just inside the threshold, letting your gaze sweep across the room's edges. The walls curve inward slightly, shaped not like a public hall, but like a funnel, as if to focus sound in one central place. Everything about the chamber feels intentional and unsettling. At the far end, raised slightly above the floor, stands a long stone bench carved directly from the wall. Its surface is polished smooth by age, though no intricate carving or gilded decoration marks it. This isn't where emperors held court. It's where quiet orders were delivered. You step toward it slowly, the soles of your sandals brushing dust in thin spirals across the floor. Between you and the bench stretches a long groove in the stone, faint but unmistakable. A shallow channel worn by footsteps, or perhaps the slow drag of shackles across the floor. It runs straight from the chamber's entrance to the base of the magistrate's bench. You pause in the center of that path, letting your breath settle, eyes tracing the curve of the ceiling overhead. Barrel vaulted, perfectly balanced. Roman craftsmanship again, applied even in places no ordinary citizen would see. Historians write about the efficiency of Roman legal systems, the crisp formality of the 12 tables. But few dwell on what justice looked like here, beneath the marble and columns sealed off from daylight. You walk the length of the chamber now, passing between rows of supporting pillars. Their surfaces are smooth, undecorated, except for faint tool marks left by masons long gone. At intervals along the walls, you spot narrow alcoves set waist-high into the stone. Not windows. Rome didn't leave such obvious gaps beneath its forum, but perhaps speaking apertures. Places where guards or scribes might have passed scrolls in and out, or listened for names and verdicts. The weight of this space is inescapable. You imagine the scene now as it must have been. A prisoner standing where you stand, head bowed, chains cold around their ankles. No crowd to witness, no applause. Only the flat voice of a magistrate echoing from the raised bench. According to ancient accounts, these hidden tribunals handled sensitive cases, accusations too dangerous or too politically charged for open trial, conspiracies, treason, blasphemy against the emperor. You step closer to the magistrate's bench now, running your hand lightly along its cold surface. The stone feels older here somehow, worn smoother by hands, sleeves, scrolls unrolled across it again and again. You pause beside a faint groove, cut along the bench's edge, perhaps where a stylus scraped parchment, or where a magistrate's ring left its mark after years of quiet decisions. Behind the bench, another doorway opens, this one narrow, hidden by the curve of the wall. You step through it slowly, torchlight stretching ahead. It leads into a smaller room, square and plain. And here's the detail that catches your breath. Along the far wall, set chest high, a single marble plaque remains. Its surface is smooth except for two words, carved in perfectly measured Latin capitals. Silentive server, to keep silence. No other inscription, no date, just that. You step closer, letting your hand brush against the plaque's edge. This was a place where voices mattered, where the wrong word spoken too loudly could end a life as easily as a verdict. You return to the main hall now, footsteps quieter than before. And as you stand once more before the magistrate's bench, the quiet settles heavier around your shoulders. The far side of the room holds another door, taller this time. Beyond it lies another corridor, sloping downward. You follow it slowly, torch held high, eyes adjusting to the thicker dark. At the end of the passage, a heavy wooden door bars the way, iron-studded, reinforced. You push it gently, feeling the weight give beneath your hand. And beyond it opens a waiting chamber. No seats, no benches. Just a wide, empty space where those awaiting judgment stood in silence before being called into the tribunal room. Scratched along the wall here, faint but visible, are names, dozens of them. Not grand inscriptions, just hurried marks, cut into the plaster with whatever tool came to hand. Historians still wonder if these names were left by prisoners or by guards. Quiet marks of record in a place no one else would see. You move slowly along the wall, tracing name after name with your fingers. Latin, Greek, sometimes misspelled or cut short. A record kept in stone rather than scrolls. And all the while, the echoes follow you. Not loud, not harsh, just steady. The quiet rhythm of a city that judged without speaking its judgments aloud. You return once more to the central hall, standing in the center, beneath the high arch of the vaulted ceiling. Above your head, the forum bustles on, markets and senators and marble temples shining in the sun. But down here, beneath the stones of power, Rome's quietest sentences were carried out. And as you walk slowly toward the exit corridor now, leaving the tribunal behind, the weight of all those unseen voices lingers with you. Whispered names, unwritten verdicts, the echo of sandals against stone, fading into silence once again. The quiet beneath the forum feels heavier as you begin your ascent, not with the closeness of stone pressing in, but with the sense of having passed through something final. The tribunal chambers, the forgotten relics, the silent corridors, they all linger behind you now, folded into darkness as steady as sleep itself. But the path ahead tilts upward at last, and the stone under your feet grows warmer with each careful step. You can feel it now, the edge of the city reasserting itself above, not as a sudden break, but as a slow layering of light over shadow. You follow the sloping corridor upward, your torch casting elongated shapes along the walls as it flickers with each step. The incline is measured, not steep enough to trip you, but steady enough to remind you that you are leaving something hidden behind. Roman engineers carved these routes with deliberation, not simply as escape passages or utility tunnels, but as the quiet connective tissue of the city. Not every passageway was meant for prisoners. Some were meant for senators and magistrates, moving unseen between the places where laws were written and the places where they were enforced. The walls grow smoother now, less rough and irregular than the lower levels. You run your hand along them as you walk, fingertips tracing the faint lines where one stone block meets another. In some places, the mortar between them has worn away almost entirely, leaving barely a seam. But the structure holds, as solid as the day it was laid. Ahead, the tunnel shifts again. It broadens just slightly, and here you notice not simple paving stones beneath your feet, but a full walkway edged with carefully fitted tiles. Dark gray and white, set in alternating rows, designed not for beauty, but for order. It feels like a signpost, Rome's quiet way of telling you that you are nearly back in its public face. The air tastes sharper as you climb. It's still cool, but no longer the damp, breathless chill of buried stone. There is movement now, a faint draft pulling through the corridor, carrying with it scents from above. Not strong, but they're all the same. Olive oil, warm bread, the dusty sharpness of limestone sun-baked for hours. And in the background, just beyond the edge of hearing, the first murmurs of life filter down. Voices, footsteps, carts rattling along distant stones. You pause for a moment on a small landing carved into the slope. The ceiling here arches slightly higher, making room for a heavier door set into the far wall. Its surface is oak, bound in iron strips that have darkened with age. You step toward it carefully, resting one hand on the cool metal handle. It is simple in design, shaped to fit the grip of any hand. No ornate decoration, just the quiet, functional hardware of a city that valued strength in the small things as much as it did in its grandest triumphs. The hinges groan softly as you pull the door open, and sunlight spills through the gap in pale streaks that cut across the dusty floor. You step through without hurry, sandals scraping against the threshold. One step, then another, and just like that, the forum stretches out before you again. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The brightness is soft at first, golden light washing over pale marble, catching on polished columns and the flicker of banners hung between archways. The air feels warmer, wrapped in the quiet hum of late morning. You stand at the edge of a shaded walkway, looking out across the plaza. Merchants arrange their goods beneath linen awnings strung between columns. Baskets of olives, folded bolts of cloth, amphories stacked in tidy rows waiting to be sold or carried away on donkey carts. Senators pass in slow procession, their white togas gleaming as they cross from one temple to another, deep in conversation about matters far removed from prisons or forgotten chambers. The city moves around you as if nothing below exists. You step fully into the sunlight now, letting the warmth settle across your shoulders. The stone beneath your feet feels different here. Not heavier, but lighter somehow. Less about what's hidden and more about what stands in plain sight. Yet as you walk slowly across the plaza, letting the rhythm of the city fold around you, you can't quite shake the memory of the corridors below. Each smooth marble tile beneath your sandals covers a layer of silence. Each statue standing tall against the sky casts a shadow that reaches deeper than its base. That is Rome's shape. Not a flat surface, but a series of stacked layers, each one hidden beneath the last, each carrying the quiet work of power beneath the noise of markets and the clash of politics. You pause near the temple of Castor and Pollux, resting one hand lightly against a marble column. Its surface is cool despite the sun, steady beneath your fingertips. Around you, the forum's regular business continues, voices rising and falling, the creak of wooden carts moving across stone, the slow ripple of cloth banners caught in the breeze. And yet, no one looks toward the shaded doorway from which you've just emerged. No one glances downward at the stones beneath their feet. The surface matters, the show, the gilded ceilings and polished statues. What lies beneath is not for public eyes. That's the weight of it now. Rome builds not just in marble, but in memory, layered beneath memory. You move again, stepping past the curia, past the bronze doors that lead into the Senate's inner chamber. Soldiers stand nearby in quiet ranks, helmets gleaming in the sun, spears planted in perfect rows beside them. Their faces are blank, impassive, not because they don't care, but because Rome teaches its guardians to look forward, not downward. The city's rhythm continues, from one law to the next, from one ruler to the next, and beneath it all, the stones hold steady, carrying the echoes of names no longer spoken aloud. As you walk toward the forum's far edge now, you let your steps slow again, not because you're tired, but because there's something deliberate about rejoining the flow of the city after so long beneath it. You cross beneath a row of arches, sandals scraping softly across pale stone, the sun warm on your back. And as you pass through the shadowed colonnade, your mind shifts gently forward too, because as weighty as those hidden chambers were, life above them always moves on. Rome knows how to step from judgment into celebration, from silence into song. It folds power into its very meals, into the clink of silver plates, the pouring of wine, the careful conversation shared between couches draped in silk. That's where tonight's path leads next. Not beneath the ground this time, but into light. Into life at a Roman senator's dinner table. The forum fades behind you now, its marble arches blurring into the steady noise of city life. Ahead, quieter streets unfold, roads lined with private villas rather than temples, courtyards hidden behind tall gates, cool shadows where wine is poured and games are played, from stone to silk, from iron to silver. The next story begins. You leave the forum behind now, walking not toward the markets or public baths, but along quieter, narrower streets. The stones underfoot remain smooth, arranged in the same deliberate patterns Roman engineers favored, but the pace shifts noticeably. There's no shouting from merchants here, no soldiers standing guard. Instead, the road curves between tall, shaded walls, where the scent of laurel and olive oil drifts on the breeze, and the rustle of fabric replaces the sharper sounds of public life. This is the Esquiline Hill, where Rome's wealth gathers behind closed gates. The houses here are not temples or palaces in the imperial sense, but domus, private homes built on a scale that feels almost theatrical in its calm restraint. You pause beneath an archway, framing a villa's entrance. The doorway is tall and wide enough for a small cart to pass through, but tonight there are no deliveries. Just a single bronze lamp hanging from an iron chain above the lintel, swaying gently in the late evening air. Its flame glows steady, casting a warm light across the marble threshold. You step through without hurry, sandals brushing softly against the polished stone as you enter the atrium. Immediately, the temperature changes. The open sky narrows to a square patch of pale twilight, framed by colonnades on all sides. Above, stars just beginning to appear glimmer faintly between curling streams of incense, smoke that rise from low burers placed in careful rows along the floor. Your eyes adjust to the softer light here. No torches burning fiercely, no bright sun blazing from above. Instead, bronze lamps hang from hooks set along the walls, each casting a steady golden pool of light against smooth plaster painted in deep red and ochre tones. The floors beneath your feet are marble, white veined with dark green and gold, polished to a mirror sheen, so fine that each step leaves a faint reflection trailing behind you. There's no sound of hammers here, no clatter of chains or shouts from the street, just the faint murmur of conversation drifting from deeper within the house. You pause by the impluvium in the center of the atrium, a shallow pool designed to catch rainwater from the open roof above. Its surface glimmers faintly in the lamplight, disturbed only by the occasional ripple as a drop of evening dew falls from the rafters. Surrounding it are low benches draped in cloth, bronze basins for washing hands, and delicate clay jars painted with swirling vine patterns. This isn't the world of tribunals or hidden prisons anymore. This is Rome's other face, the face of quiet wealth, measured control. You step carefully past the impluvium now, moving into the peristyle garden beyond. Here, the marble floors shift to mosaic, tiny tiles arranged in complex patterns that weave beneath your feet like living artwork. The air carries the scent of flowering shrubs and crushed herbs. Laurel, lavender, perhaps a hint of myrrh. Bronze lamps stand on tall tripods between the garden's low shrubs, their flames flickering in a rhythm that matches your breathing. You pause beside one, resting your hand lightly against its cool metal base. The craftsmanship is unmistakable. Curved supports shaped like curling acanthus leaves, each joint fitted so precisely there's no visible seam. And here, standing beneath the quiet flicker of bronze lamps, you feel the weight of something very different from the power beneath the forum. There, judgment came in stone and silence. Here, power speaks in silver platters and whispered conversations over wine. You move toward the far side of the garden now, where the triclinium waits. The dining hall. Its wide double doors stand open, revealing a room lit not by torches, but by steady rows of bronze lamps hanging from long chains. Their flames reflect off polished wall panels inlaid with thin strips of ivory and darker woods, cypress, perhaps, or imported cedar. The marble floor here is even more polished than in the atrium. Its surface catches the light like water, swirling with faint colors, greens and whites, layered together in quiet, deliberate patterns. You walk slowly, letting each step echo softly in the stillness. Couches line the edges of the room now, 3 at each table, arranged in the classic Romang style, draped in silk-dyed deep red and purple, their cushions arranged with quiet care. Beside each couch, low tables gleam beneath the weight of silver platters and polished glass bowls. The triclinium isn't crowded. This isn't a public banquet. It's a private cena, an evening meal shared among senators and their closest allies. A place not for show, but for the quieter games of politics played behind closed doors. You pause beside one couch now, letting your hand trail along its silk-covered surface. The fabric feels cool and smooth beneath your fingertips, heavier than it looks. Imported, no doubt. Egyptian or Persian weave. Along the wall to your left, tall amphories stand in a neat row. Clay vessels sealed with wax, painted with delicate inscriptions in black and red ink. You catch fragments of names as you walk past, vintages from distant provinces. Hispania, Achaia, Africa. Wine meant to oil the wheels of conversation, not just fill cups. Historians often describe Rome's political life as centered in the Senate. But walking here now, past silver platters and bronze lamps, it's clear where the real balance shifted. Not in loud votes, but in quiet agreements made over dinner. You pause at the center of the room, standing beneath a larger lamp shaped like a hanging disc. Its surface is carved with scenes of myth. Apollo driving his chariot, Venus rising from the sea. The flame flickers from a shallow basin at its center, sending golden light rippling outward like sun on water. The marble beneath your feet catches that light, turning it into a slow dance of shadow and reflection. You stand quietly for a moment, breathing in the scent of wine and warm herbs. No one speaks loudly here. Voices rise and fall in steady murmurs. Names mentioned in careful sequence. Proposals floated like ships tested against a tide. You move once more around the edge of the room, letting the quiet fold around you. It's a different kind of silence from what you left behind beneath the forum. Not empty, not absolute, but measured, controlled. The bronze lamps flicker on, steady as the city's heartbeat. And tonight, that's where your journey leads next. Not toward judgment, but toward the slow unfolding of a Roman evening, one quiet word at a time. You remain in the triclinium now, letting your eyes take in the shape of the room as though seeing it for the first time. With the marble floors polished to a mirror-like gloss beneath your feet, and the soft flicker of bronze lamps casting steady golden light across walls painted in deep ochre and vermilion, there's a quiet symmetry to everything. Every table, every couch, every vessel of wine and bowl of olives sits in its proper place. But beyond the stillness of the room, there's something more deliberate at play here. You've already noticed how each couch is carefully positioned, 3 placed along each side of the tables in that classic Roman U-shape. But it isn't merely about fitting the most guests into a small space. There's a deeper logic to the arrangement, something closer to choreography. Reclining while dining was not a Roman invention, but they refined it to an exact science, making it as central to elite life as the Senate or public baths. You step closer to one of the couches now, letting your hand trail along its silk-draped cushions. The fabric feels cool beneath your fingers, smooth and faintly weighted, as though the threads themselves had been spun with quiet authority. On its own, the couch might look simple, a wooden frame, padded with layers of wool and stuffed linen, covered in silk dyed a rich, wine-colored red. But its placement, its height, even the width of its base are all calculated to encourage exactly one thing: reclining. And this wasn't just a matter of lying down casually. Romans reclined on their left side specifically, supporting themselves on their left elbow, with their head angled slightly upward and their right hand left free. It's a position you try now, easing down onto the couch slowly, arranging your legs just so, the way you've seen it done in surviving mosaics and marble friezes. At first, It feels unfamiliar, a little awkward even. But as you adjust your weight and let your shoulders settle against the silk, you begin to understand the quiet logic behind it. Reclining like this leaves you open, vulnerable perhaps, but also unhurried. A man reclining doesn't jump to his feet to argue. He doesn't rush to finish his meal and leave. He lingers, and lingering was exactly the point. From where you rest now, propped on your elbow, your view shifts. You notice how the tables are set just low enough that you don't need to reach far to take a piece of bread, a fig, a cup of wine. And the bowls placed at intervals along the tabletop, each with slices of cured meats, spiced nuts, or delicate cheeses, are arranged to encourage quiet sharing. No one piles their plate here. Each person takes only what they need, passing platters from hand to hand with an easy, practiced rhythm. And within that rhythm lies a kind of silent hierarchy. Historians have recorded how the placement of each guest at a Roman dinner was determined by rank and favor. The lectus medius, the middle couch along the central side of the table, was the seat of highest honor. The man lying closest to the host would be his most valued guest, perhaps a magistrate, a senator of particular influence, or a visiting dignitary. Lower-ranked guests would take the outermost positions. Even the direction one reclined mattered. The most important guests reclined so they faced the room's entrance, a subtle signal of authority and watchfulness. You rise from the couch now, smoothing the silk cushions with one hand as you stand. Walking slowly along a line of couches, you pause to examine their construction more closely. The frames are made from dark wood, walnut, or perhaps imported cedar from distant Lebanon, fitted together with bronze joints polished so finely there's barely a seam. Along the couch legs, faint decorative carvings curl in acanthus leaf patterns, delicate but precise. Beyond the couches, near the room's corner, you notice another quiet detail. A series of small footstools placed just beneath the table's edge. These aren't for the diners themselves, but for serving servants, placed discreetly so they can kneel or crouch while presenting dishes without standing taller than their masters. Every element in the room is measured toward this delicate balance: honor and humility, indulgence and restraint. You step back into the center of the room now, gazing up at the lamps hanging in even rows along the ceiling. Their bronze surfaces catch the lamplight in warm golden glows, and the chains from which they hang are polished smooth, shaped like twisted vines. The scent of warm oil drifts through the air, mingling with hints of roasted meat, honeyed pastries, and sweet herbs. And as you stand quietly beneath that soft glow, you imagine the triclinium at its fullest. 30 guests perhaps, each reclining in practiced ease, voices murmuring in overlapping currents. Wine would flow steadily, but never be poured in clumsy excess. Cups refilled only after a guest drained the last sip and placed his vessel quietly on the table's edge. No loud toasts. No raucous shouting. Not in a senator's villa. Here, power was expressed through stillness as much as speech. The man who reclined too tensely, who reached too quickly for a second helping, marked himself as inexperienced, perhaps even untrustworthy. The real measure of status wasn't how much one could consume, but how easily one could appear to care for nothing at all. Historians still speculate on just how formal these meals could be. Were there always set rules for speech? For how long one should linger over each course? Or was it simply a matter of custom, unwritten, but universally understood? What's clear is that reclining was more than physical posture. It was a symbol. A senator reclining at dinner wasn't merely relaxing. He was showing that his place in the world was steady enough that he could afford to sit back and let others do the worrying. You step once more toward the garden-facing wall, pausing near a tall amphora, standing on a marble base. Its neck is sealed with wax, and along its side, a painted inscription identifies its contents. Falernian wine, vintage 15 years. The amphora is marked with the name of the vineyard and the year of harvest, details not shared with just anyone. but meant to signal quiet wealth to those who could read its codes. And once more, as you let your hand brush lightly across the emperor's side, you feel how measured it all is. From the couch's angle to the wine's label, everything here exists to convey a message: permanence, control, and above all, belonging. You glance back once more at the couches now, arranged so perfectly around their silver-trimmed tables. The art of reclining isn't about indulgence. It's about confidence. A man who reclines knows he will rise again. And as the lamps continue their slow flicker overhead, the rhythm of the evening flows on toward its next phase. Not just posture, but the meal itself, measured course by course, served in steady sequence. From quiet position to quiet appetite. From reclining to dining. That is where the evening continues next. The triclinium does not fill all at once. It gathers in slow, deliberate layers, just as the courses of the meal unfold one after another. You stand near the edge of the marble floor now, leaning lightly against a smooth stone column, as guests begin taking their places along the couches. Each man moves with practiced ease, settling into the art of reclining as though it were a natural extension of breathing. And as they settle, servants move quietly between them, pouring the first wine of the evening into shallow bowls of clear glass. The meal begins not with fanfare, not with some grand announcement, but with a single quiet course. Olives first. Simple dishes of them, green and black, marinated in oil and herbs, piled into clay bowls no larger than a handspan across. These are placed at regular intervals along the tables. A servant kneels beside each couch, holding a small knife in one hand and a folded cloth in the other, ready to assist but never speaking unless spoken to first. And yet, even as the olives appear, you sense immediately that this is only the lightest possible beginning. The real weight of the meal has yet to arrive. You walk slowly between the couches now, letting your eyes follow the flow of dishes as they emerge from a wide doorway at the far end of the room. There, through a set of heavy bronze doors that swing open, and shut with quiet rhythm, the villa's kitchens send forth their steady stream of plates, bowls, and trays. What's striking isn't just the variety, it's the sheer excess of it. No single table could hold it all at once. The courses are designed to flow in waves. One dish placed down, admired, shared, then quietly removed and replaced before the next arrives. Historians often describe Roman elite dining as indulgent. But standing here now, watching the steady parade of food, it doesn't feel rushed or clumsy. It feels carefully staged, like a performance played out not with actors, but with figs and cheeses, roasted meats, honeyed pastries, and salted fish arranged in shining rows. You pause beside a table as the first round of true dishes arrives. The olives are swept away now, replaced by small bowls of honeyed nuts and thin slices of soft white cheese dusted with herbs. Alongside them appear loaves of bread, still warm, their crusts dusted lightly in flour. A servant uses a small bronze knife to slice the bread into delicate pieces, placing each one onto a polished wooden plate before passing it to the reclining diners. The scents layer themselves slowly through the air now. Warm bread, crushed fennel seeds, a hint of fresh mint from the herbs laid carefully atop each dish. And yet, as steady as it all seems, there's already a sense that this is merely the beginning. The real meal, the heart of the cena, still waits beyond this quiet prelude. You step back slightly now, moving closer to the wall, where bronze lamps flicker gently from tall stands shaped like curling vines. From here, you can see the entire room laid out like a living mosaic. Couches arranged with mathematical precision, guests reclining in silence or murmured conversation, servants moving between them like ripples across water. And then comes the first true signal of the evening's next phase. From beyond the bronze doors, two servants emerge carrying a long silver platter between them. Upon it rests a roasted fish, its skin golden and glistening beneath a layer of honey glaze. The eyes are intact, the fins carefully arranged as though it had just been pulled from the sea and laid upon the platter without a single scale disturbed. You watch as the servants kneel beside the central table now, placing the fish gently down upon the polished wood. A murmur passes between the diners, a quiet note of appreciation, not loud enough to break the room's measured stillness, but present all the same. The fish is cut carefully now, its flesh divided along neat seams with a bronze knife shaped like a bird's wing. Each piece is passed first to the highest-ranking guest, then on down the line. No one eats hurriedly. No one reaches across the table. Everything flows in deliberate rhythm, as measured as a senator's speech. And yet, even as the fish is served, the next course is already being prepared. Plates of spiced sausages, trays of stuffed dormice, yes, dormice, plumped with nuts and seasoned with pepper and honey, are carried into the room and placed alongside the remaining dishes. You move once more through the space now, passing close enough to catch glimpses of each platter's contents as it's laid down. Roasted songbirds glazed in wine and spices. Dishes of lentils cooked slowly with garlic and bay leaves. A meal of too much everything. Not merely because the Romans lacked restraint, but because each dish serves a quiet purpose. To show abundance. To show control. The man who hosts such a meal displays his wealth not in gold piled in vaults, but in bread laid upon the table, in sauces prepared from rare ingredients imported from the edges of the empire. Historians still puzzle over the exact menus served in villas like this. Ancient texts describe courses in broad terms. Gestatio, the appetizers. Prima mensa, the main dishes. Secunda mensa, the desserts. But here, watching it unfold, it feels like a continuous tide, not a series of isolated steps. You pause near the wall once more, watching as yet another round of dishes arrives. Bowls of figs, plates of oysters nestled in crushed ice, a rarity in this heat, trays of honey cakes arranged in spiraling patterns. Each dish appears just as the last is finished, with barely a pause in between. There is no single center to the meal. It spreads outward like ripples on a pond. And through it all, the reclining guests remain perfectly still, propped on their left elbows, reaching quietly with their right hands to sample each new offering. You notice, too, how the wine changes as the meal progresses. At first, it was light and mixed with water, served in clear glass bowls. But now darker, heavier vintages appear. Falernian, Cacuban, wine aged in clay amphorae sealed with wax and marked with painted inscriptions. And even the cups themselves grow heavier. Early in the evening, guests drank from simple clay vessels. Now, silver bowls appear, chased with delicate designs. Ivy leaves, racing chariots, scenes from myth. Each cup balanced perfectly in the hand, designed to spill nothing as a guest reclines. You step once more into the room's center now, standing quietly beneath the largest bronze lamp as its flickering light ripples across the polished marble floor. The scent of roasted meat, honey, and wine hangs thick in the air, layered like music played beneath conversation. And here, at the height of the meal, it becomes clear that the point isn't merely to eat until full. It's to fill the space with quiet abundance, to leave nothing lacking, yet never tip into chaos. The meal will continue for hours more, each course easing into the next, like the turning of a tide. And all the while, Rome's quiet work unfolds, not in loud decrees, but in gestures shared over silver plates, in words spoken between bites. From the first olive to the final honeyed fig, a meal of too much everything. And as you step slowly back toward the garden beyond, the lamps flickering behind you, the quiet rhythm of the senna continues on without pause. You stand now at the edge of the triclinium, the bronze lamps flickering steadily as the meal moves into its deeper rhythm. The plates are fuller now, not with olives and honeyed figs as before, but with richer meats, thicker sauces, darker wines. Yet for all the excess laid carefully across the low tables, the atmosphere never tips into disorder. Conversations drift like smoke from one end of the room to the other, slow, measured, deliberate. No raised voices, no sudden laughter, only the steady hum of Roman politics, unfolding not in the forum or the curia, but here, between bites of stuffed dormice and sips of Falernian wine. It's clearer now than ever. This meal is never just about food. It's about placement, proximity, whispered questions and quiet nods. The real decisions that shape Rome do not happen in front of crowds. They happen here, where silk-draped couches and polished silver set the stage for agreements made too delicately to record in writing. You walk slowly along the line of reclining guests now, moving between the couches with careful steps, so as not to disturb the delicate balance of wine, food, and words. Along the central couch, the lectus medius, three men lean toward each other more closely than the others. Their heads bend together, as if drawn by the same silent gravity. Their voices low enough that even the servants standing nearby cannot make out the full shape of what's said. One gestures lightly with his wine cup, tilting it slightly in emphasis, while another places a hand against the table's edge in quiet agreement. There's no need for documents or official seals here. A nod replaces a contract. A glance holds the weight of law. Historians still debate how much of Rome's real business was conducted in villas like this, rather than in the Senate chamber. Certainly, the formal laws and edicts were recorded in marble and ink, but the alliances behind them, who supported which magistrate, who agreed to fund which public work, those details unfolded here, between courses, in the brief pauses between mouthfuls of roasted songbird and honeyed wine. You pause near the wall now, watching as a new round of servants moves through the room, carrying fresh platters, trays of layered pastries soaked in honey, bowls of dates stuffed with nuts and dusted in cinnamon. Yet even as the servants lay these down, they keep their eyes lowered, their movements precise and silent. They know their role is not simply to serve, but to disappear into the background of something larger. One servant kneels beside a guest now, holding out a small cloth so the man can wipe his fingers after sampling a particularly sticky dish. The senator leans back slightly, head tilted as he speaks to the man reclining beside him, his words flowing as smoothly as the wine in his cup. And again, you notice that quiet rhythm. Each sentence timed between bites, never interrupting the act of dining, always folding seamlessly into the meal's gentle tide. There's an art to it, you realize. Not just reclining, not just eating, but speaking while doing both, without seeming rushed or overeager. The senator who speaks too quickly marks himself as inexperienced. The one who waits too long loses his chance. It's a dance of words and silences, as structured as any formal ritual. You step closer to the couches now, standing where the lamps cast a softer glow against the mosaic floors. From here, you can make out fragments of the conversation drifting through the room. Mentions of shipments arriving from Alexandria of new taxes, proposed by a magistrate in the city's outer districts, of grain stores being replenished after a particularly lean winter. It isn't the language of empire building in grand strokes. It's quieter, more practical. Who owes whom? What favors have been promised? What punishments might quietly be arranged for those no longer in favor? And all the while, the meal flows on. The servers move like shadows along the walls, refilling cups, clearing plates. Bread is replaced as soon as the last crumb is taken. Bowls of fruit and salted nuts appear and vanish in steady rotation. You notice, too, how the placement of guests affects everything. The farther from the lectus medius a man reclines, the less he speaks. Those along the outer couches observe more than they participate. Their words chosen carefully, their silences even more so. It's a hierarchy not enforced by law, but by centuries of quiet understanding. And for all its stillness, there's a kind of tension in the air now. Not fear exactly, but something like waiting. You see it in the way a senator pauses before reaching for his cup, glancing at the man beside him as if to measure whether the conversation has shifted in some new direction. You hear it in the careful way questions are phrased, not bluntly, but in layers, offering space for deniability should the wrong ear overhear. Historians often wonder how decisions made in rooms like this filtered up into official law. But standing here now, it's easy to see how it worked. First a quiet word over dinner, then a formal proposal in the Curia days later, supported by those same men reclining side by side beneath flickering bronze lamps. You walk slowly along the outer edge of the triclinium now, passing near the open garden beyond. The scent of night air drifts through the wide doorways, cool, sharp with crushed herbs, and the faint sweetness of myrrh, still burning from incense, placed along the marble steps. Yet even as the garden waits beyond, no one rises yet. The cena continues, fewer courses now, lighter dishes, but no less deliberate in their arrangement. It's the final phase, where stomachs are full, but minds remain sharp. You pause once more beside the lectus medius, watching as a senator leans forward slightly, setting down his cup with the gentlest click of silver against wood. His words flow now in a steady current. A suggestion, a quiet observation about a governor's recent actions in the provinces. Nothing so direct as accusation, nothing so firm as command. And yet, in the way his companions nod, in the way the men farther down the couches glance toward each other, it's clear something has shifted. An agreement reached, a plan set quietly in motion. You step back now, letting the scene settle into its steady rhythm once more. No shouting, no raised fists or clashing weapons. Just politics between bites, spoken in quiet tones beneath the steady flicker of bronze lamps and the soft glow of polished marble. The meal will draw to its close soon. Wine bowls drained, platters cleared, rose petals scattered lightly across the floor as a final gesture. And yet, for all the food consumed and words exchanged, nothing will be written down tonight. Nothing recorded. It will pass from mouth to mouth, couch to couch, moving quietly outward like ripples across a still pool. And as you turn once more toward the garden beyond, letting the scent of cool night air guide your steps, the triclinium behind you holds steady in its quiet power. Not the power of armies, not the power of marble monuments, but the power of those who speak softly and are listened to all the same. Politics between bites. Rome's truest heartbeat. The triclinium no longer carries the weight of urgency now. The last courses have been cleared away. The heavy Falernian wine poured and slowly sipped until bowls sit half full beside reclining hands. And yet, no one shows signs of rising or preparing to leave. If anything, the atmosphere stretches thinner, like the last long note in a song drawn out as far as possible before the silence that inevitably follows. You stand quietly near the doorway, leading back toward the peristyle garden, observing the room as it settles into its final rhythm for the evening. It is in these hours, after the plates have been cleared and politics have drifted into quieter currents, that Roman senators and their guests turn to late-night diversions. Entertainment is as essential to the Roman Senna as wine or bread, not merely as a luxury, but as a final layer of display. A man's status is measured not just by the richness of his platters, but by the subtlety and quality of the performers he can summon to fill the hours after midnight. The musicians arrive first, two of them, stepping silently through the broad bronze doors that lead toward the villa's inner chambers. There is no grand introduction, just the soft clinking of their instruments as they move through the lamplight. One carries a small lyre, polished wood, strung with tightly wound chords. The other holds a double aulos, two slender pipes of ivory and bronze, bound together at the mouthpiece. Their arrival does not disrupt the room's quiet hum. No one claps or turns abruptly to look. Rather, the music begins as though it has always been there, as natural as the flickering of the bronze lamps overhead. A slow, pulsing rhythm from the aulos first, low notes that seem to curl beneath the voices rather than rise above them, followed by the gentle plucking of the lyre. You move closer now, standing just behind one of the couches as a senator lifts his cup with unhurried grace, sipping slowly while his gaze drifts toward the musicians. The sound settles like silk into the space, shaping the air rather than commanding it. And alongside the music comes the dancer. She emerges from the shadows as though stepping out of the villa's marble walls themselves, dressed in flowing silk-dyed pale green and gold. The fabric clings to her arms as she raises them, fingers extended, each movement deliberate and measured. The senators watch her not with hungry eyes, but with the same quiet attention they give to debates in the curia. Her steps are slow, precise, designed not to shock, but to echo the flow of the evening's mood, a living reflection of the meal's final notes. Her feet glide across the marble, silk trailing behind her in quiet arcs. She turns once, then twice, arms extended like branches swaying in wind. The lamps catch against golden threads woven into her sleeves, sending flickers of warm light across the faces of the reclining guests. You step around the edge of the room now, moving closer to the musicians. From here, you can see the concentration etched into their faces, eyes half closed, hands moving with practiced ease along the strings and holes of their instruments. The music they play is not written down. It is shaped in the moment, rising and falling in response to the dancer's steps and the subtle shifts in conversation among the guests. Historians often focus on the grand entertainments of Roman life: gladiatorial contests, theater performances in packed amphitheaters. But evenings like this hold their own quiet power. In these smaller rooms, where wealth and influence gather in silk and silver, entertainment takes on a more refined form, something closer to ritual than spectacle. As the music continues, servants move through the room with fresh bowls of wine, thinner now and mixed with water to stretch the evening's pace. Alongside the wine, small plates appear again, not full courses, but light offerings. Sugared almonds, preserved fruits, honey cakes no larger than a coin. Guests accept them with unhurried hands, continuing their quiet exchanges as though the music and dancing were simply another layer of conversation. You pause once more near the lectus medius, observing as one senator leans toward his companion, voice so low it barely stirs the air between them. Even now, in these final hours of the Senate, there are things to say, names to be mentioned, decisions to be weighed. The politics never truly stop. They only soften around the edges, like wine left too long in the cup. At the far end of the room, a poet now steps forward. Not a grand figure dressed in bright colors, but a man in plain wool, scroll in hand, waiting patiently for a quiet moment to begin. He does not interrupt the music. Instead, he waits for the lyre's final notes to fade before lifting his voice in steady cadence. The poem he recites is no epic tale of war or empire. It speaks instead of the city itself, of marble streets glistening with morning dew, of rivers curling past olive groves, of quiet gardens hidden behind tall walls. His words weave through the air like smoke, rising gently above the reclining guests, their weight subtle but unmistakable. You listen as the verses unfold, noting how even those furthest from the central couch pause now to hear. The poetry holds as much sway in this room as any decree. Its rhythm another kind of power layered beneath wine and conversation. Once the poem ends, a soft murmur passes through the room, a quiet acknowledgement, not applause, but something steadier, more respectful. The poet bows his head, stepping back into the shadows, his place taken once more by the music and the dancer, who returns now with slower steps. And all the while, the lamps continue their steady flicker. Their flames do not waver as the night deepens. The air grows cooler now, carrying with it the scent of myrtle and crushed herbs from the villa's outer gardens. You step toward the open door once more, letting the night air brush against your skin. Above, The stars shine sharp and clear, mirrored faintly in the still surface of the villa's central pool. Even the city beyond feels quieter now. The forum sleeps, the markets rest. But within these marble walls, the evening lingers. There is no formal dismissal, no clear signal that the cena has ended. Guests rise when they choose, some earlier, some later, moving as slowly as they arrived. Servants step forward to assist, offering sandals, cloaks, small bowls of scented water to wash away the last traces of honey and wine. You watch as one senator stands now, adjusting the folds of his toga with deliberate care before offering a final word to his host. No grand farewell, just a quiet nod, a steady look exchanged between men who know their next conversation will carry on tomorrow. Perhaps in the curia, perhaps back here in another private room. The triclinium empties not all at once, but gradually. A few guests remain, still reclining, still sipping the thinnest traces of watered wine. The music slows further, fading until it becomes less a melody and more a memory. And you step once more into the garden now, leaving behind the flicker of lamps and the shimmer of silk cushions. The villa stands quiet around you, its marble walls glowing faintly in the starlight. And as you walk along the colonnade, the final echoes of the evening settle into stillness. Late-night entertainment. Not a riot of sound or color, but a final thread in Rome's quiet tapestry. Measured steps, measured notes. And beneath it all, the weight of power resting as steady as marble beneath your feet. The air inside the villa feels heavier now, but not from heat or smoke. It's the heaviness that settles when activity ebbs away completely, when there is nothing left to arrange, no conversations left unfinished. You move slowly through the colonnaded halls, sandals gliding across marble tiles that have already begun to cool beneath your feet. Earlier, those same stones pulsed faintly with the warmth of gathered guests and oil lamps burning bright. Now, the heat has bled away, absorbed into the earth beneath. The lamps flicker lower with every passing moment. Their bronze bowls still cast warm light along the walls and ceilings, but the glow is subdued, no longer bright enough to sharpen the gold leaf along painted friezes, just enough to show the shape of the room, the quiet patterns laid into its floor. You walk quietly past the tall wooden doors that lead to private sleeping chambers now. Each one stands closed, the wax seals along their bronze hinges untouched. Beyond them, smaller rooms wait in silent readiness. Low beds draped in linen, tables set with bronze basins and folded towels, oil jars placed carefully on shelves for guests who might stay the night. But tonight, no one occupies them. The last senators have slipped away, their sandals whisking down marble steps toward waiting litters or quiet carriages outside. Their voices have faded into silence. Their words, spoken so deliberately between bites of honeyed figs and sips of Falernian wine, now belong to the shadows. You pass the atrium once more, pausing beside the impluvium pool. Its surface is undisturbed, reflecting the square of sky above like a mirror laid flat on stone. The stars above Rome glimmer sharply in its depths. No wind stirs here, no ripples. The house itself feels as though it's holding its breath. And beyond the atrium, the triclinium remains as you last saw it. Couches neatly arranged around low tables, silk cushions resting in perfect stillness. The silver dishes have been cleared away. The last of the wine bowls have been wiped clean and stacked in silent rows along the side tables. Only the faintest trace of incense lingers in the air now, a final wisp curling in from the spent burners placed near the garden doors. You walk through the triclinium slowly now, moving between the couches. Each step echoes gently in the stillness. The mosaic beneath your feet feels cool again, the polished marble tiles returning to the same steady chill they held before the evening began. And as you move, it's impossible not to think about the layers of time folded into these walls. Earlier tonight, this room held not just the weight of food and wine, but of quiet decisions that could shape the city outside. Names spoken carefully, Alliances tested, small gestures exchanged between men reclining side by side. Now, all of that feels folded into the stone itself, as though the walls have absorbed it, storing the evening's rhythm in their cool, pale surfaces. You pause once more beneath the largest bronze lamp hanging from the center of the ceiling. Its flame still burns, but lower now, a single steady flicker in a bowl nearly empty of oil. The shadows it casts move slowly along the walls, stretching longer and thinner until they seem almost to vanish into the marble itself. Historians write about Rome's grand villas as places of luxury, of excess. But standing here now, you sense something else. Luxury, yes, but also restraint, a deliberate calm. The senator's villa does not end its evening in riotous laughter or wild celebration. It closes itself gently, as carefully as a scroll being rolled back into silence after its verses have been read. You step back into the garden beyond the triclinium now, moving through the colonnade with deliberate pace. The cool night air brushes against your skin, carrying with it the scent of laurel, olive wood, and faint traces of crushed herbs. The garden itself stands perfectly still. Tall potted plants arranged in rows, narrow pools reflecting the sharp edge of starlight, no breeze disturbing the silence. Beyond the garden, the city sleeps. The forum's marble columns cast long shadows beneath the moon. The streets lie empty save for the occasional patrol. But here in the villa, that quiet feels thicker somehow, like silk curtains drawn across a doorway, soft and heavy. You pass once more through the halls, leading toward the guest chambers, pausing here and there to rest your hand against cool plaster walls. The frescoes painted along them feel different now. Earlier, they were simple decoration, vines curling around urns, doves perched on marble steps, river gods reclining against rocky shores. Now, in the lower lamplight, they seem quieter somehow, as though the painted figures have folded themselves into sleep alongside the house's living occupants. And then, at last, you return to the villa's entrance. The bronze doors stand closed now, their iron bolts slid into place. No servants wait by them anymore. Their work is done. You stand quietly beneath the final lamp burning in the atrium. Its flame flickers just once more before settling into a steady, low glow. The marble beneath your feet has grown cool. Not cold, not harsh, just settled, like a quiet breath held beneath a layer of silk. You take one final step back toward the center of the atrium now, pausing by the impluvium once more. The stars overhead have shifted slightly in the sky since the evening began, but the pool beneath them remains perfectly still, reflecting the night exactly as it was hours ago. Sharp, silent, endless. And as you stand there, you realize this is the true weight of the senator's villa. Not just the food, the wealth, the politics, but the silence that follows, when the couches are empty, when the silver has been cleared away, when the walls themselves seem to sleep. That is Rome's quietest strength, not its noise, but its ability to hold stillness as carefully as it holds power. You take a final breath now, letting the cool air settle into your chest as fully as the marble beneath your feet holds its quiet weight. And as the last lamp burns lower, the villa folds itself entirely into sleep. From iron chains in hidden cells to silk cushions beneath silver platters. From stone vaults echoing with forgotten names to cooling marble walls holding steady beneath moonlight. One story folding gently into the next. And as the villa grows still, the next words wait quietly ahead. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the cold, silent cells beneath Rome's forum to the quiet echo of senators reclining on silk-draped couches. From iron shackles scraping against stone floors to bronze lamps flickering in marble halls. A long, slow walk through the layered shadows and softer lights of ancient Roman life. If you're still awake, thanks for staying with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the hidden prisons and the late-night dinners, That's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole idea. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly journey through history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it was when you pressed play. It's always a quiet kind of surprise, seeing where these late-night history stories travel. For now, I'll let the iron doors close, the marble floors cool beneath empty footsteps, and the last bronze lamps flicker gently out. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.